I'm Savannah Mitchell, 29, an architect living in Boston. Yesterday, I called my Aunt Patricia about my brother Mason's wedding, supposedly happening today in Atlanta. I can't wait for the ceremony tomorrow, I gushed, genuinely excited despite our complicated relationship. There was an awkward pause before she responded. Savannah, it was last week. My stomach dropped as my vision blurred. She continued talking, but her words became distant echoes as reality crashed around me. Before I share how my entire family could exclude me from this milestone, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if family betrayal stories resonate with you. Growing up in suburban Atlanta, the differences between my brother Mason and me were apparent from elementary school. While I gravitated toward books, art, and solitary creative pursuits, Mason embodied the all-American athletic ideal with his natural charisma and football talents. My parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, never tried to hide their preference for his accomplishments over mine. When I won the state science competition in 8th grade, they nodded politely before rushing off to Mason's football game. When I earned a full scholarship to Cornell for architecture, my father merely commented that it was nice before launching into a 20-minute discussion about Mason's fraternity antics at Georgia Tech. The family dynamic wasn't subtle. Mason was the golden child whose achievements were celebrated with dinner parties and social media announcements, while mine warranted brief acknowledgments at best. Our family photos told the story clearly. Mason front and center beside our beaming parents, while I often stood slightly apart, my smile a bit too forced. Despite this imbalance, I maintained hope that adulthood would equalize our standing in the family. After graduating with honors, I accepted a position at a prestigious Boston architectural firm, believing distance might help reset our relationship dynamics. The geographic separation gave me perspective on patterns I'd normalized, how family gatherings revolved around Mason's schedule, never mine, how my parents called him daily but reached out to me only when they needed something, usually money or professional advice, since my career had flourished. My childhood friend Zoe, who remained in Atlanta, saw the pattern clearly. They treat you like an ATM with a blueprint service, she once remarked after I mentioned sending money for my parents' anniversary party, an event I wasn't actually invited to attend because it just came together last minute. I dismissed her concerns, attributing the oversight to innocent forgetfulness rather than systematic exclusion. The irony didn't escape me that despite being the less favored child, I had become the financial safety net for the family. My Boston-based position at Montgomery Designs had accelerated my career beyond my peers, allowing me to accumulate savings that my brother's more modest insurance sales job couldn't match. When my parents mentioned wanting to renovate their aging colonial home last Christmas, I immediately offered to contribute substantially and provide design expertise for free. They accepted with an enthusiasm I rarely saw directed at me, and for once, I felt genuinely valued. Mason's engagement to Amber Wilson 6 months ago rekindled my hope for family reconnection. When he called to share the news, he actually asked me to help plan aspects of the wedding given my eye for design, the first time he'd ever acknowledged my professional abilities. I threw myself into helping select the venue, a historic garden estate outside Atlanta, and consulted on decorations, even creating digital mock-ups of the space. We had several video calls where Mason and Amber seemed genuinely appreciative, with Amber commenting that my ideas saved the wedding. I committed to flying from Boston to Atlanta for the June 15th ceremony, blocking time off work months in advance and purchasing a non-refundable first-class ticket as a treat to myself. The wedding represented more than my brother's marriage. It symbolized my reintegration into the family fold, a chance to heal old wounds, and establish a more balanced adult relationship with my parents and brother. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. My mother forgot to include me in the bridal shower invitation list. The rehearsal dinner details were never shared despite my repeated requests. My suggestions for the ceremony gradually disappeared from the plans without explanation. But each time, I rationalized their behavior, determined to break the cycle of exclusion through persistent goodwill. The Mitchell family had a long history of forgetting to include me, childhood birthday parties where invitations went out late, forcing me to scramble for friends, high school graduation where they failed to reserve enough seats for my academic mentors, Even my architecture license celebration where they promised to visit but canceled last minute for Mason's flag football tournament. Each incident in isolation seemed like an unfortunate oversight, but Zoe had been pointing out the pattern for years. They don't forget things for Mason, she observed after my parents missed my virtual awards ceremony, but managed to attend his fantasy football draft in person the same weekend. Still, family loyalty ran deep, and I continued making excuses for their behavior while seeking their approval through achievement and generosity. The revelation about the wedding blindsided me completely. I was sitting in my Boston apartment that Thursday evening, suitcase half-packed on my bed, when I decided to call Aunt Patricia to confirm what time she'd pick me up from the Atlanta airport the next day. Patricia had always been marginally kinder to me than my parents, occasionally acknowledging my accomplishments with small gifts or cards. When she answered, her voice carried the overly bright tone people use when uncomfortable. After exchanging pleasantries, I mentioned my excitement about tomorrow's ceremony. The silence that followed stretched painfully before she responded with those devastating words. "Savannah, it was last week." Initially, I thought I had misheard her. "What do you mean?" "Mason's wedding is tomorrow, June 15th. Patricia sighed, then explained in a hesitant voice that the wedding had occurred the previous Saturday, June 8th. According to her, the date had changed months ago due to venue availability issues. My hands began to tremble so badly, I nearly dropped my phone. "That's impossible," I insisted, my voice barely audible. "I've been helping plan everything for June 15th. I have the emails, the calendar invites." Patricia interrupted gently. "Honey, I'm looking at the wedding photos right now. Would you like me to send some?" Without waiting for my response, my phone buzzed with an incoming video call request. I accepted it with numb fingers to find Patricia's face looking concerned before she flipped the camera to show her laptop screen displaying a professional photo album. There they were, unmistakable images of Mason in a classic black tuxedo standing beside Amber in a stunning white gown with the cathedral veil I had helped her select. My parents flanked the couple, my mother in the periwinkle blue dress she described to me, my father sporting the new gray suit he'd mentioned purchasing. The background featured the exact floral arrangements I had suggested, white roses and blue hydrangeas cascading from garden trellises. Every detail I had consulted on was perfectly executed, except I was nowhere to be seen in any image. Patricia scrolled through dozens of photos, the ceremony under the oak arbor, the reception in the glass conservatory, the dance floor where my father twirled a laughing Amber. Photos captured Aunt Patricia herself, Uncle James, my cousins Alexis and Taylor, even distant relatives from California I hadn't seen in years. Everyone was present except me. "They." My voice cracked. "They told me it was tomorrow. I have my ticket, my hotel confirmation." Patricia made a sympathetic noise but continued scrolling, stopping at a group photo showing literally every member of the extended Mitchell family posed on the grand staircase of the venue. An entire family united, minus one daughter. My stomach clenched as I recognized faces of relatives who had responded to my texts about seeing them at the wedding just days earlier. My cousin Taylor had asked about my flight details on Tuesday. Uncle James had mentioned looking forward to catching up on Wednesday. None of them had indicated anything was amiss or that the event had already occurred. Did they say why I wasn't there? I managed to ask, my throat constricting around each word. Patricia hesitated before responding. "Your mother told everyone you couldn't make it because of a big project deadline. Some people asked about you, but..." She trailed off awkwardly. A project deadline. The convenient excuse manufactured to explain my absence to confused relatives. The calculated lie that would prevent anyone from questioning further or reaching out to me directly. The professional photos revealed other disturbing details, personalized table settings with calligraphed name cards for every family member except me, the memory table displaying family photographs where I had been systematically excluded, and most painfully, the wedding program listing the beloved family members in attendance, my name conspicuously absent. As Patricia continued flipping through images, I noticed the wedding hashtag in the corner of one photo, hashtag Mason and Amber June 8. Pulling up Instagram with trembling fingers, I searched the tag to find hundreds of posts from a week ago, guests celebrating, dancing, sharing candid moments from my brother's wedding. Posts I had never seen because everyone had carefully avoided tagging me. My cousin Alexis, who had texted me about borrowing shoes for the wedding just yesterday, had posted 15 photos with captions about the perfect family celebration. Family friends I'd known since childhood had shared stories about the intimate family gathering, while presumably knowing I had been excluded. The physical evidence was overwhelming, but my mind struggled to process the magnitude of the deception. This wasn't a miscommunication or an oversight. It required coordinated, deliberate action by dozens of people over an extended period. Patricia, I interrupted her ongoing commentary about the flower arrangements. Did everyone know the date had changed except me? My aunt paused, confusion crossing her features. Well, I thought you knew but couldn't make it. The new invitations went out months ago. New invitations. Invitations I had never received. Can I see the invitation? I asked. Patricia fumbled in her desk drawer before holding up an elegant cream-colored card with gold foil lettering. The date clearly read Saturday, June 8th, not the June 15th that had been in every communication I received. My parents and brother had maintained the charade of the later date exclusively with me while informing everyone else of the change. The realization hit me with physical force. This was not an error or miscommunication. This was intentional, coordinated exclusion executed with frightening precision. I thanked Patricia weakly before disconnecting, then sat motionless in my half-packed apartment, surrounded by the unworn bridesmaid dress I'd purchased, the wrapped wedding gift, and printed directions to a ceremony that had already happened without me. After ending the call with Patricia, I sat frozen for nearly an hour before summoning the courage to call my parents. My hands shook so badly, I had to redial twice. When my mother answered with a casual, "Hello, sweetie," as if nothing were amiss, something fractured inside me. "Mom," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "I just spoke with Aunt Patricia. The wedding was last week." A pause then. "Oh, goodness, didn't we tell you?" The date changed last minute because of a scheduling conflict with the venue. Her tone carried the slight impatience she typically used when explaining something obvious. "Last minute," I repeated incredulously. Patricia said new invitations went out months ago. I never received one. My mother sighed dramatically. "We definitely told you, Savannah. Remember when we called in March about the venue issue? I'm certain we mentioned it then." That call had indeed happened, but the date change was never discussed. I had meticulous notes from every wedding-related conversation, a professional habit that now served as evidence of their deception. "Mom, I have our text messages from literally yesterday where you mentioned looking forward to seeing me at the wedding this weekend. Why would you say that if it already happened?" Another pause. "Well, you must have misunderstood. Your father, tell Savannah about the date change we discussed." My father's voice came on the line, gruff and dismissive. "We definitely told you it moved to the 8th. Maybe you weren't paying attention, as usual." The familiar accusation that my focus was somehow deficient when it came to family matters stung with practiced precision. "Dad, I took time off work for the 15th. I have a plane ticket for tomorrow. I've been texting everyone about the wedding this week, and no one, not one person, mentioned it already happened." My father's response chilled me. "Don't make this about you, Savannah. It was Mason's special day, and he was disappointed you chose not to come." The audacity of this statement momentarily robbed me of speech. They were not only denying their deception but actively recasting me as the villain who had deliberately skipped the wedding. When I finally collected myself, I asked to speak to Mason. Minutes later, my brother's voice came through, artificially bright. "Hey, Save, what's up?" As if we were having a normal conversation. As if he hadn't just gotten married without his only sister present. "Mason," I said quietly, "why wasn't I at your wedding?" His laugh sounded forced. "What are you talking about? We told you the date changed to the 8th. Everyone knew." The coordinated nature of their lies became increasingly apparent as I pressed for details. When asked exactly when they had informed me, each family member gave different answers. Mom insisted it was during a March phone call. Dad claimed they had sent an email in April. Mason swore he had texted me the new date in May. When I pointed out the contradictions in their stories, they smoothly shifted tactics. Perhaps they had collectively forgotten to tell me, but surely that was an understandable oversight amid wedding stress. The conversation took an even more disturbing turn when I asked about the dozens of interactions we'd had in the past week, all centered around a wedding supposedly happening on June 15th. You probably just got confused, my mother suggested sympathetically. You've always mixed up dates. Remember that time in high school when you missed Grandma's birthday? This reference to a minor scheduling error from 15 years ago exemplified their strategy, excavating ancient history to establish a pattern that didn't exist. When I mentioned the non-refundable plane ticket and hotel reservation, my father snorted dismissively. Always so concerned about money. It's just a couple $100, Savannah. The ticket had cost over $800 and the hotel another $400. Significant sums they casually dismissed while knowing I had incurred these expenses for an event they ensured I would miss. My growing anger must have been evident because Mason suddenly adopted a conciliatory tone. Look, we're really sorry if there was a miscommunication. We'll make it up to you. You can come visit next month and we'll have a special dinner. The offer was insulting, equating a special dinner with their daughter and sister's exclusion from a once-in-a-lifetime family event. I hung up and immediately called my cousin Taylor, hoping for a different perspective. Instead, Taylor uncomfortably confirmed that everyone had received new invitations months ago and had been told I couldn't make it due to work commitments. When I pressed about our text exchange just days ago discussing the upcoming wedding, Taylor became flustered. I thought we were just talking generally about the wedding. I didn't realize you didn't know. One by one, I contacted relatives and family friends who all told variations of the same story. They had been explicitly informed by my parents or Mason that I was unable to attend due to pressing work obligations. Some expressed having found it odd that I would miss my only brother's wedding but hadn't felt it was their place to question my supposed decision. My colleague Diane called during this painful investigation, concerned when I didn't show up for our morning meeting. Through tears, I explained the situation. Unlike my family, her outrage was immediate and validating. Savannah, that's not a misunderstanding, that's calculated emotional abuse. Her words crystallized what I had been struggling to name. This wasn't a mishap or oversight. It was a deliberate, coordinated effort to exclude me from a significant family milestone while maintaining plausible deniability. In a desperate attempt to find evidence of the notification my family insisted had occurred, I scoured my email archives, text messages, voicemails, and even postal mail. Nothing. No invitation with the updated date, no email mentioning the change, no text from Mason with the new information, nothing but continued references to the June 15th date I had been planning around for months. The final piece of evidence came from an unlikely source, Amber's sister Jessie, whom I had met only twice during video planning calls. She responded to my carefully worded inquiry with shocking candor. I always thought it was weird they changed the date, but didn't tell you. Amber and I had a huge fight about it. I told her it was messed up to exclude you, but Mason convinced her you'd understand since you're not really close anyway. Not really close. The phrase echoed painfully. I had spent months helping plan their wedding, contributed ideas they had implemented, and offered genuine support despite years of feeling secondary in my family. The deliberate nature of the exclusion was now undeniable, confirmed by an outsider who had witnessed the decision-making process. I sat in my apartment surrounded by wedding preparations that would never be used, confronting the devastating reality that my family had not only excluded me from a significant event, but had orchestrated an elaborate deception to ensure I wouldn't discover the truth until it was too late. The realization was physically nauseating. I barely made it to the bathroom before emptying the contents of my stomach. Curled on the cold tile floor afterward, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what had been true all along. The people who should have loved me most had methodically, intentionally hurt me in a way that could never be accidentally explained away. The week following my discovery passed in a blur of grief and revelation. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done without legitimate illness, and spent days alternating between crushing despair and clarifying anger. My apartment became both sanctuary and prison as I avoided human contact beyond necessary conversations with my boss and brief updates to Zoe, who offered to fly to Boston immediately. I declined her offer but accepted her virtual support through daily video calls where she listened without judgment as I processed the magnitude of the betrayal. Sleep eluded me completely for the first 72 hours, my mind endlessly replaying incidents throughout my life that suddenly appeared in a new, disturbing light. The forgotten birthday party invitations in 3rd grade that arrived the day after the celebration. The college graduation dinner reservation mysteriously changed without my knowledge, resulting in my arrival at an empty restaurant while my family dined across town. The Christmas when everyone received personalized gifts while I received a generic gift card with the wrong name written on the envelope. Each incident I had previously attributed to carelessness now revealed itself as a deliberate pattern of exclusion. On the 4th day, I forced myself to shower, change clothes, and begin a methodical investigation of my family communications. With the cold precision I typically applied to architectural projects, I created a timeline of every interaction regarding Mason's wedding, cataloging emails, texts, and phone calls with timestamps and content notes. The evidence was damning. Consistent references to the June 15th date in every communication with me, contrasted with social media posts from family members clearly showing awareness of the June 8th date weeks in advance. No notification of the change had ever been sent to me through any medium. I found an email from 3 months prior where I had specifically referenced looking forward to the June 15th ceremony, which had received replies from both my mother and Mason without any correction of the date. Text messages from my father just days before the actual wedding discussed what he planned to wear next weekend. Not one family member had slipped or revealed the truth, demonstrating a coordinated effort that must have required constant vigilance and communication among them. Even more disturbing was the discovery of a group chat excluding only me, where relatives had discussed wedding logistics explicitly mentioning the June 8th date. My cousin Alexis had accidentally sent me a screenshot meant for this group months ago, which I had archived without much thought at the time. Reviewing it now revealed a message from my mother reminding everyone not to mention the date change to Savannah. The premeditation was staggering. On day 5, I finally contacted my therapist, Dr. Winters, for an emergency session. I had begun therapy 6 months earlier for what I had vaguely described as family issues, but had never delved into the specifics, still protecting my family's image. Now I shared everything: the wedding exclusion, the gaslighting aftermath, and the mounting evidence of lifelong emotional neglect. Dr. Winters listened attentively before naming what I had experienced. Savannah, what are describing is a textbook case of family scapegoating and emotional abuse. The level of coordination required to maintain this deception indicates this isn't impulsive behavior, but a deeply ingrained dynamic. Her validation cracked something open inside me. We spent 2 hours dissecting patterns I had normalized since childhood, how I had been assigned the role of family scapegoat, consistently blamed for conflicts I didn't create, expected to give financially and emotionally without reciprocation, and systematically excluded from positive family experiences while being required to support everyone else's milestones. Dr. Winters explained how common it was for scapegoated children to become high achievers, unconsciously trying to earn the love withheld from them, while simultaneously being punished for those very achievements if they overshadowed the designated golden child. My academic and professional success had become both my defense mechanism and the target for my family's resentment. The wedding exclusion, she explained gently, represents an escalation of existing patterns, likely triggered by your increasing independence and success. By maintaining the fiction of the wrong date, they ensured you would miss the event without having to explicitly uninvite you, allowing them to maintain their self-image as loving family members while telling others you chose not to attend. That night, I cried for hours, not just for the wedding I had missed, but for the loving family I had never actually had. The grief felt bottomless, mourning both the specific loss and the lifelong absence of unconditional love I had continuously tried to earn. By the second week, grief began transforming into clarity. I remembered contributing $15,000 toward wedding expenses, money Mason and my parents had eagerly accepted despite planning my exclusion. I found emails where I had offered design consultations for the venue, detailed suggestions Mason and Amber had incorporated without credit, and evidence of my genuine emotional investment in an event I would never witness. The financial exploitation added another dimension to the betrayal. My friend Zoe finally said what I had been avoiding. They used you for your money and expertise, then discarded you when it came time to celebrate. The harsh assessment resonated with undeniable truth. I began reviewing other financial contributions I had made to family causes over the years, helping fund my parents' anniversary vacation, contributing to Mason's car down payment, regularly sending gifts and money for holidays while receiving token acknowledgments in return. The pattern of financial exploitation paralleled the emotional dynamics. I gave generously, received minimally, and was expected to continue without complaint. 3 weeks after the discovery, I received a text from my mother asking when I planned to get over this misunderstanding because they missed hearing from me. The casual dismissal of my pain became the catalyst for a decision that had been forming subconsciously. After consulting with Dr. Winters, I crafted a calm, direct email to my parents and Mason explaining that I needed space to process their actions and would be taking a break from communication for an undefined period. I didn't blame or accuse. I simply stated facts about the wedding date deception and my need for distance. Their responses arrived predictably. My mother expressed wounded confusion about why I was still dwelling on an honest mistake. My father accused me of being overly sensitive as usual, and Mason sent a single line. I thought you'd be bigger than this. Not one acknowledged the harm they had caused or offered a genuine apology. Their reactions confirmed Dr. Winters' assessment that acknowledging their behavior would threaten the family narrative they had constructed, where I was perpetually at fault and they were always reasonable. The space from constant contact allowed me to recognize how much energy I had devoted to seeking their approval, managing their emotions, and trying to earn a place in their inner circle, a place that had been systematically denied regardless of my efforts. For the first time, I considered the possibility of defining family on my terms rather than continuing to seek inclusion in a system designed to exclude me. After 4 weeks of limited contact, I had established a fragile new normal. Returning to work provided welcome structure, and weekly sessions with Dr. Winters helped process layers of family dynamics previously invisible to me. I began reconnecting with friends I had neglected while prioritizing family relationships, discovering support networks I hadn't fully appreciated. My boss had been unexpectedly understanding, even offering me a challenging new commercial project that provided healthy distraction. The acute pain had evolved into a dull background ache, present but no longer debilitating. Then came the call that shattered my tentative peace. My phone lit up with my father's name one Tuesday evening as I reviewed design plans. I nearly declined but decided answering might demonstrate my emotional progress. Savannah, my father began without preamble, we need to discuss the home renovation financing. The contractor is waiting on the first payment, and your mother wants to start before the fall weather arrives. No greeting, no inquiry about my well-being, no acknowledgement of our recent conflict, just an immediate financial demand. I remained silent, processing the audacity of this approach, which prompted my father to continue with growing impatience. We've selected the materials you suggested in your initial design, but the contractor needs 30% down to secure the schedule. We were thinking you could transfer the money by Friday. The casual presumption that I would still contribute after their betrayal momentarily stunned me. Before I could respond, my father added, "Your mother wants to know if you can come down next weekend to review the plans in person. She's thinking about changing the kitchen layout." The entire conversation proceeded as if the wedding deception had never occurred, as if I hadn't explicitly requested space, as if our relationship remained unchanged. When I finally found my voice, I asked simply, "Dad, did you call to check how I'm doing after what happened with the wedding?" His dismissive snort carried through the line with perfect clarity. "Savannah, are you still upset about that miscommunication? It was weeks ago. Family doesn't hold grudges." The selective amnesia was breathtaking. My family certainly held grudges about perceived slights from years earlier, but my exclusion from my only brother's wedding apparently didn't warrant remembrance beyond a month. I maintained composure, while explaining I needed to review my finances before committing to the renovation contribution. My father's tone immediately chilled. "We've already scheduled the contractor based on your commitment. Mason helped us pick finishes yesterday since you've been unreachable." The implied criticism was familiar. Regardless of circumstances, I was always positioned as the unreliable, difficult family member. The conversation ended with my promise to think about it and my father's barely concealed irritation. Minutes later, my mother called with a sweeter approach, reminiscing about childhood memories in the house and emphasizing how meaningful the renovation would be for all of us as a family. When gentle manipulation failed to secure an immediate financial commitment, she added with calculated casualness, "Mason and Amber might live with us while their house sells. Wouldn't it be nice to have the renovation finished before they move in?" The strategic mention of Mason, positioning his needs against mine, represented another familiar dynamic. My brother called next, his approach more direct. "Look, Mom and Dad already put down a deposit using some of the wedding money, expecting your contribution to cover the rest. They'll lose that deposit if you back out now." The revelation that they had diverted funds I had contributed for the wedding to start the renovation added another layer of financial exploitation. When I pointed this out, Mason scoffed, "It's all family money anyway. What's the difference?" The difference, of course, was consent and transparency, qualities consistently absent in our family's financial interactions. The calls continued throughout the evening, my mother again with thinly veiled guilt tactics, my father with increasingly direct demands, even Aunt Patricia recruited to check if you're feeling better about everything, while coincidentally mentioning the renovation excitement. Their coordinated pressure campaign mirrored the wedding deception in its organization and single-minded focus. Not one call included a genuine apology or acknowledgement of harm. Instead, each conversation contained subtle reminders of my perpetual family role, the difficult daughter whose feelings created inconvenient obstacles to family plans. The following morning brought emails from my parents with contractor quotes, material selections, and a formal request for $45,000, significantly higher than the $30,000 initially discussed months earlier. The budget increase came without explanation or consultation, simply an expectation of compliance. My mother's message ended with a casually devastating line. "We need to move forward with or without your input, sweetie, but it would be so much easier with your help." The implicit threat was clear. My participation was financially desired, but emotionally optional. That evening, Mason called again while I was having dinner with a colleague. I excused myself to take the call, expecting more renovation pressure. Instead, his voice carried unusual tension. "Savannah, I need you to stop making things difficult for Mom and Dad. They've been really stressed about your reaction to the wedding situation." The statement perfectly encapsulated our family dynamic. My reaction to their hurtful behavior, rather than the behavior itself, was positioned as the problem requiring resolution. When I remained silent, Mason continued, "Look, you've always been sensitive about feeling left out, even when no one was actually excluding you. We all walk on eggshells trying not to trigger your insecurities." The gaslighting attempt was so transparent, it almost seemed desperate. "Mason," I responded carefully, "you got married without telling me the correct date. That's not an insecurity I imagined." His frustrated sigh conveyed volumes. "It was a miscommunication that you're choosing to interpret in the worst possible way. Anyway, that's water under the bridge. The important thing now is the renovation." The swift pivot from dismissing my feelings to refocusing on financial demands crystallized something I had been struggling to accept. In my family's eyes, my primary value was utilitarian rather than relational. This realization brought unexpected clarity. While Mason continued detailing renovation plans, I experienced a profound internal shift, the recognition that no explanation, evidence, or emotional appeal would ever penetrate the family narrative where I was perpetually wrong and they were perpetually justified. The understanding was simultaneously devastating and liberating. When Mason finally paused for breath, I spoke with newfound calmness. I'll need to see a complete budget breakdown and timeline before making any decisions about the renovation. My practical response temporarily satisfied him, though his parting comment, "Try not to overthink things like you always do," demonstrated how deeply ingrained the dismissal of my perspective remained in our interactions. That night, reviewing years of financial contributions to family causes, I recognized a pattern of emotional taxation, each dollar representing an unconscious attempt to purchase the acceptance consistently withheld from me. The renovation request wasn't just about money. It represented a critical decision point about my future role in the family system. Would I continue financing relationships that provided minimal emotional return, or establish boundaries that honored my worth beyond utility? The question lingered as I drafted budget questions for my parents, professional and detached, while privately scheduling a flight to Atlanta. Some conversations needed to happen in person, with clear eyes and firm boundaries. I spent the week before my Atlanta trip preparing meticulously with Dr. Winters. We role-played potential family responses to boundary setting, developed grounding techniques for managing emotional manipulation, and established clear parameters for the conversation. "Remember," she emphasized during our final session, "you're not responsible for their reactions to your boundaries. Their discomfort with your limits doesn't make those limits unreasonable." I arrived in Atlanta on a humid Friday afternoon, having informed my parents I was coming to discuss the renovation in person. Their excited response, focusing exclusively on showing me material samples rather than repairing our relationship, confirmed they expected our usual dynamic to continue unchanged. I checked into a hotel rather than staying at their house, a small act of independence that already felt significant. When I pulled into their driveway Saturday morning, my chest tightened with familiar anxiety. The colonial-style house where I'd grown up appeared exactly as it had during my Christmas visit, the chipping white paint and sagging porch steps representing years of deferred maintenance they now expected me to finance. My mother opened the door with an enthusiastic greeting that avoided any mention of recent conflicts. "Savannah." Perfect timing. The contractor just dropped off new tile samples for the master bathroom. No hug, no acknowledgement of my flight, just immediate focus on renovation details. My father emerged from his study with a folder of documents. "We've prepared a complete breakdown of costs like you requested. The bottom line is at the back. We'll need the first installment by Wednesday to lock in the contractor." The business-like approach to what should have been a reconciliation visit perfectly illustrated our dysfunctional dynamic. Mason and Amber arrived 30 minutes later, carrying architectural magazines and chatting about fixtures, as if we were simply continuing a pleasant ongoing project rather than addressing a significant breach of trust. My mother suggested lunch before getting into all the boring budget details, her transparent attempt to delay the potentially difficult conversation I had come to have. Over carefully prepared sandwiches, my favorite type in what appeared to be a calculated touch, the conversation remained superficially pleasant, focusing on neighborhood gossip and Amber's new teaching position. When my father finally steered discussion toward the renovation timeline, I placed my water glass down deliberately and spoke the words I had rehearsed. "Before we discuss financial commitments, I need to address what happened with the wedding." The table fell silent. My mother's smile froze while my father's expression hardened. Mason and Amber exchanged quick glances that confirmed their awareness of the tension. "Savannah," my mother began with forced lightness, "we've moved past that little miscommunication, haven't we?" "No need to dwell on. It wasn't a miscommunication," I interrupted quietly, removing my phone from my pocket. "I've compiled every email, text message, and documented phone call about the wedding from the past 6 months. There was never any notification about a date change. In fact, there are dozens of explicit references to the June 15th date from all of you, continuing right up until the week of the actual ceremony." The evidence-based approach momentarily stunned them. They had expected emotional accusations they could dismiss as overreaction, not documented proof of their deception. My father recovered first, his tone shifting to authoritarian dismissal. "This is ridiculous. We're not going to sit here while you present some kind of legal case against your family." His attempt to reframe my reasonable request for accountability as an attack illustrated the strategy they had always employed: positioning my desire for fair treatment as unreasonable and aggressive. "I'm not presenting a case," I responded calmly. "I'm establishing facts before making a financial decision. You've asked me to contribute $45,000 toward renovating a home where I was made to feel unwelcome throughout my childhood, requested by family members who deliberately excluded me from a significant life event while accepting my financial contribution toward it." The blunt assessment landed like a physical blow. My mother's eyes widened while my father's face flushed with anger. Mason stared at his plate, suddenly fascinated by sandwich crumbs. Amber, witnessing our family dynamics directly for perhaps the first time, looked visibly uncomfortable. "That's completely unfair," my mother finally managed, tears appearing on cue. "We've always loved you. We made one mistake with the wedding date." "It wasn't a mistake," I said, my voice remaining steady. Jesse confirmed that the date change was deliberately not communicated to me. The group chat I was excluded from contained explicit instructions not to mention the new date to me. This was a coordinated decision, not an oversight. The mention of external confirmation disrupted their unified front. My mother glanced accusingly at Amber, whose sister had apparently broken ranks. My father shifted strategies, moving from denial to minimization. Even if there was some miscommunication, holding a grudge is childish. Family forgives. The familiar guilt tactic slid off me with surprising ease as I continued. "I've contributed financially to this family for years. College funds for Mason's stepchildren, medical bills when dad needed surgery, mom's catering business startup. I've given my professional expertise for free whenever asked. I've consistently shown up emotionally and financially while being treated as an afterthought." That dynamic ends today. The silence that followed held a different quality, less shocked, more calculating, as they assessed how this new version of me might impact their plans. My father, ever practical about financial matters, attempted redirection. "Whatever issues we need to work through can happen over time. The contractor needs an answer by next week." His transparent prioritization of the renovation over relationship repair validated my decision. "I've made my decision about the financing," I stated clearly. "I won't be contributing to the renovation." The reaction was immediate. My mother's gasp, my father's darkening expression, Mason's sudden attention. "You committed to this project," my father said, voice dangerously quiet. "We've made arrangements based on your commitment." Just like I committed to attending a wedding on June 15th and made arrangements accordingly, I replied evenly. Commitments in this family appear to be flexible. The parallel landed precisely as intended. My mother switched tactics instantly, moving from wounded innocence to urgent concern. "But what about your connection to your childhood home? Don't you want to preserve those memories?" The irony of appealing to sentimental attachment after systematically undermining my place in the family was apparently lost on her. "I've decided to direct my architectural expertise and financial resources elsewhere," I explained, describing my recent commitment to design a community center renovation in Boston. "It's a project that aligns with my values and allows me to contribute to people who demonstrate reciprocal respect." Mason finally entered the conversation, anger breaking through his careful neutrality. "So, you're punishing the entire family because your feelings got hurt? That's incredibly selfish, Savannah." His accusation, positioning my boundary as punishment rather than protection, might have devastated me months earlier. Now, it simply confirmed the accuracy of my decision. "I'm not punishing anyone," I clarified. "I'm allocating my resources according to how I'm valued. I would welcome a relationship with all of you based on mutual respect rather than utility, but that would require accountability for past behavior and changed patterns moving forward." I outlined specific conditions for continued relationship, acknowledgement of the wedding deception without deflection or minimization, recognition of long-standing patterns of exclusion, and commitment to transparent communication moving forward. My father's dismissive snort made his position clear before he even spoke. "So, we have to submit to some kind of formal probation to remain in your life? This isn't how family works, Savannah." His rejection of basic relational standards as unreasonable perfectly illustrated why those standards were necessary. "That's how healthy relationships work," I corrected gently. If those terms feel like probation rather than basic respect, that highlights exactly why I'm establishing boundaries. The conversation deteriorated predictably from there, my mother cycling through tears, guilt-inducing references to health concerns, and finally cold anger, my father moving from authoritarian demands to dismissive insults about my fancy Boston therapy theories, Mason escalating to accusations about family disloyalty that revealed more about his values than mine. Throughout their emotional display, I remained centered in a way that clearly unsettled them. They had expected either compliance or emotional breakdown, not composed boundary enforcement. When my father finally declared, "If you can't support this family financially after everything we've done for you, maybe you should reconsider whether you want to be part of this family at all," I recognized the ultimatum for what it was, a final attempt at control through the threat of rejection. My response came from a place of unexpected clarity. I've always wanted to be part of this family. The question is whether this family wants to include me as a person worthy of respect rather than as a financial resource. I gathered my belongings calmly, leaving the untouched renovation plans on the table alongside the boundary conditions I had printed. At the door, I turned back to see 4 stunned faces processing the realization that their familiar control tactics had failed. "I'm staying at the West Side Hotel until Monday morning if anyone wants to discuss moving forward differently. I love you all and hope we can build something healthier." Walking to my rental car, I experienced neither triumph nor devastation, just the quiet certainty of having honored my worth after decades of allowing it to be diminished. 6 months after that pivotal Atlanta confrontation, my life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. None of my family members had visited me at the hotel that weekend, though my mother had sent a text suggesting I was being dramatic and would come around eventually. Their confidence that I would revert to established patterns revealed how fundamentally they misunderstood the shift that had occurred. The early weeks of enforced boundaries had been challenging. The lifetime habit of seeking their approval didn't disappear overnight, and each ignored call or unanswered message triggered waves of programmed guilt. Dr. Winters helped navigate these reactions, normalizing the grief process while affirming the necessity of the boundaries I'd established. "You're mourning the family you deserve to have," she explained during a particularly difficult session, while creating space for relationships that honor your worth. Those relationships began developing in unexpected places. My colleague Diane, who had witnessed my breakdown after the wedding discovery, invited me to her family's monthly dinner gatherings. Initially attending out of politeness, I found myself embraced by her sprawling, noisy clan who demonstrated what family could be: supportive, respectful of differences, genuinely interested in each other's lives. My neighbor Malcolm, a retired English professor, became an unlikely friend after helping carry groceries during a Boston snowstorm. Our weekly coffee conversations about architecture, literature, and philosophy filled an intellectual connection I'd never experienced within my biological family. The community center renovation project I'd mentioned to my parents became a central focus, connecting me with local activists and residents who appreciated both my professional expertise and personal investment in their neighborhood. Working with people who expressed genuine gratitude rather than entitled expectation reminded me that contribution could be joyful rather than extractive. My professional life flourished amid these personal changes. Freed from the constant emotional drainage of dysfunctional family dynamics, I found renewed creative energy for my architectural work. My Boston firm recognized this shift, promoting me to senior design lead and featuring my community center project in their portfolio materials. The financial resources previously directed toward family emergencies accumulated steadily, allowing me to purchase a small but charming brownstone apartment I had previously only dreamed of affording. Occasional communications from my family arrived, testing whether my boundaries remained intact. My father sent renovation updates with passive-aggressive notes about how they had managed without burdening you. My mother's birthday card included guilt-inducing comments about families that stick together no matter what. Mason sent holiday photos of his stepchildren with pointed remarks about what you're missing by choosing to stay away. Each message revealed their unchanged perspective. My boundaries represented selfish abandonment rather than necessary self-protection. 3 months after the confrontation, an unexpected message arrived from Amber. Unlike my family's communications, hers acknowledged reality. I witnessed what happened at that lunch, and while I'm loyal to Mason, I can't pretend what they did with the wedding was okay. If you're ever ready to talk, I'd like to understand your perspective better. The olive branch, while tentative, represented the first recognition from anyone connected to my family that my experience had validity. Our subsequent coffee conversation during her Boston business trip opened a small channel of honest communication. Mason was raised to expect certain things, she admitted carefully. He doesn't always see how his family's dynamics affect others. While not exactly an apology, her acknowledgement represented progress. Through her, I occasionally received less filtered family updates. My parents had completed a scaled-down renovation. Mason had received a promotion. Family gatherings continued with my absence explained away through increasingly elaborate excuses. The knowledge brought a dull ache, but no longer the devastating pain of fresh exclusion. My most significant relationship development came unexpectedly through an architectural charity event where I met Ryan, an environmental engineer working on sustainable building solutions. Our professional collaboration evolved into friendship and eventually into a relationship built on mutual respect and transparent communication. When I finally shared my family history with him, his response was validating without being pitying. They missed out on knowing an extraordinary person. That's their loss, not a reflection of your worth. His healthy family relationships, complicated and imperfect but fundamentally loving, provided a model of what was possible when people valued connection above control. During our first holiday season together, his mother called specifically to check if I had dietary preferences for Christmas dinner, a small consideration that brought unexpected tears because it represented the attentiveness my own family had never shown. My therapeutic journey continued throughout this period of external change. With Dr. Winter's guidance, I explored how early family dynamics had shaped my self-perception, relationship patterns, and professional choices. I recognized how achievement had become both shield and currency in my attempt to earn unattainable approval. Most painfully, I confronted how I had internalized my family's narrative that my needs were excessive, my emotions inconvenient, and my boundaries unreasonable. Unlearning these beliefs proved more challenging than establishing external boundaries, requiring constant vigilance against the critical internal voice that spoke in my parents' tones. The wedding exclusion, while traumatic, had ultimately served as the catalyst for necessary change. Sometimes, Dr. Winters observed, we need a shock significant enough to disrupt our established patterns. Your family's actions around the wedding created irrefutable evidence that couldn't be rationalized away. 5 months after our confrontation, my mother reached out with a first communication that didn't include manipulation tactics. Her brief email acknowledged that things happened with the wedding that hurt you, not quite an admission of deliberate exclusion, but closer to reality than previous messages. She expressed interest in finding a way forward, though without specifics about what that might entail. After consultation with Dr. Winters, I responded thoughtfully, reiterating my conditions for healthy relationship while expressing willingness to start small if those conditions were respected. Our subsequent phone conversation contained moments of genuine connection amidst familiar defensive patterns, a mixture suggesting potential for change alongside deeply entrenched dynamics. My father and Mason remained distant, occasionally sending holiday messages or forwarding family photos, always carefully avoiding acknowledgement of the wedding situation or my subsequent boundaries. Their communications arrived like artifacts from a parallel reality where my exclusion had never occurred or had been definitively established as my fault. I responded politely but briefly, maintaining the boundaries that now protected my well-being. 6 months to the day after the Atlanta confrontation, I received an unexpected package from Aunt Patricia. It contained a flash drive of wedding photos she had collected from various family members, along with a note. I should have questioned why you weren't there. I'm sorry. The simple acknowledgement provided surprising healing, not because it changed what had happened, but because it confirmed my experience had been real rather than imagined or exaggerated. The photos showed events I would never witness firsthand, but viewing them from the emotional safety of my new life allowed me to process the exclusion without being re-traumatized by it. The experience crystallized an essential truth. Healing didn't require my family to acknowledge their behavior. It required me to acknowledge my worth regardless of their recognition. That understanding transformed my approach to these complicated relationships. I no longer needed them to validate my reality in order to trust it. I could engage with them on terms that protected my well-being while remaining open to whatever authentic connection might be possible within those boundaries. I could love them without needing them to be different, while simultaneously insisting on being treated with basic respect. 1 year after discovering the wedding deception, I find myself in a life reconstructed according to my own values rather than reaction to family patterns. The pain hasn't disappeared entirely. Grief for the loving family I never had emerges occasionally in unexpected moments. But alongside that grief exists profound gratitude for the authentic connections now filling my life, the professional work aligning with my values, and most importantly, the internal peace that comes from living truthfully. For those watching who recognize your own family dynamics in my story, please know that breaking generational patterns takes tremendous courage, but creates space for healing beyond what you might currently imagine possible. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone by modeling healthier relationship standards. Have you experienced family exclusion or had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your story in the comments below. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how your family treats you, but by the authenticity and courage with which you honor yourself and others. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more conversations about family dynamics, healing, and personal growth. Thank you for witnessing my journey from exclusion to wholeness. May it illuminate possibilities on your own path toward authentic connection.
My name is Elaine Carter, and I never thought I'd be in this position. The voicemail from my brother Robert just finished playing, his voice cracking as he begged for my help. I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the callback button, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. 6 years ago, when my daughter Lucy was fighting for her life and I couldn't afford her treatment, Robert and his wife Diana had laughed in my face. "We have a wedding to plan," Diana had said dismissively, as if my 13-year-old daughter's life was an inconvenience, an unwelcome intrusion on their perfect social calendar. Now here they were, facing foreclosure on their $1 million home, desperate for the financial help that only I could provide. Life has a strange way of coming full circle, doesn't it? I'm a financial advisor now, quite successful actually, with more than enough funds to save their home. But as I sit here in my office, memories flooding back, I can still hear Diana's cold laughter echoing in my ears. I can still feel the sting of humiliation as they turned me away at their country club, whispering that some people just can't manage their lives properly. My daughter Lucy, now a healthy, vibrant 19-year-old, walked into my home office with a curious look. "Mom, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I didn't know how to explain to her that the ghosts of our past had returned, hat in hand, begging for mercy. As I stared at Robert's name on my phone screen, I wondered what kind of person I had become. Would I help the brother who refused to help save my daughter? Or would I finally have my moment of vindication? The irony wasn't lost on me that I now held their financial future in my hands, just as they once held Lucy's life in theirs. 6 years ago, my life looked completely different. I was newly divorced from Lucy's father, who had decided that family life wasn't exciting enough, and ran off with his 23-year-old secretary to find himself in the Bahamas. The divorce left me financially strained but determined to create a good life for Lucy and myself. We moved from our spacious suburban house to a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, and I took a job as an administrative assistant at a local investment firm. The pay wasn't great, but it had potential for growth, and the hours allowed me to be home when Lucy returned from school. Despite our modest circumstances, we were happy. We had movie nights with homemade popcorn, took walks in the park, and spent weekends hunting for treasures at thrift stores. Lucy never complained about wearing secondhand clothes or not having the latest gadgets. She was mature beyond her 13 years, with a bright smile that could light up a room and a compassionate heart that made me proud every day. Then came the fatigue. At first, I thought it was just teenage growing pains, or maybe the stress of adjusting to our new life. But when Lucy developed a persistent fever and mysterious rashes, I knew something was wrong. After weeks of tests and specialist referrals, we received the diagnosis, a rare autoimmune condition that was attacking Lucy's major organs. The doctor, a kindly woman with gray-streaked hair and tired eyes, explained that Lucy needed an experimental treatment that wasn't covered by our insurance. It costs about $175,000, she said apologetically, as if she personally set the price. But without it, Lucy's prognosis is... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I saw the grim reality in her eyes. That night, after tucking Lucy into bed with promises that everything would be okay, I sat at our tiny kitchen table and mapped out a plan. I took on a second job waiting tables at night while Lucy slept. I organized fundraisers at local businesses, applied for medical grants, and even started a crowdfunding campaign. I approached banks for loans, but with my post-divorce credit score and modest income, I was denied repeatedly. After 3 months of exhausting every avenue and watching Lucy grow weaker by the day, I had managed to raise only $32,000, not even a quarter of what we needed. It was then that I thought of my brother Robert. 2 years older than me, Robert had always been the successful sibling. While I had pursued a teaching degree before becoming a stay-at-home mom, Robert had gone into real estate development and made a fortune during the housing boom. He lived in a mansion in the exclusive part of town with his wife Diana, a former beauty queen with expensive tastes and a razor-sharp tongue. They had one daughter, Melissa, who was 23 and engaged to the son of a prominent local judge. We weren't close, but surely, I thought, blood would count for something. Surely they wouldn't let Lucy die when they had more money than they knew what to do with. With hope in my heart and desperation in my soul, I decided to swallow my pride and ask my brother for help. Robert and I had been close once, building forts in our backyard and protecting each other from neighborhood bullies. When our parents died in a car accident during our college years, we'd grieved together, sorting through family photos and splitting the modest inheritance. But things changed when he met Diana at a charity gala. Diana came from old money and had definite ideas about who belonged in their social circle. Gradually, Robert's calls became less frequent, and our family dinners dwindled to obligatory holiday appearances where Diana would subtly criticize everything from my cooking to my parenting. After my divorce, the distance grew even wider. Diana made it clear that failure was contagious, and she didn't want Melissa influenced by our situation. Still, Lucy was Robert's only niece, and despite everything, I believed he would help us. I spent hours preparing for the conversation, practicing how to explain Lucy's condition without sounding like I was begging, even though that's exactly what I was about to do. I put on my best outfit, a navy blue dress I'd worn to job interviews, and drove to their sprawling estate with my heart in my throat. Their housekeeper, a tight-lipped woman named Mrs. Everett, led me through the marble-floored foyer to a sunroom, where Robert and Diana were enjoying brunch. Diana's eyes narrowed slightly at my unexpected appearance, while Robert looked up from his newspaper with mild surprise. "Elaine, this is unexpected. Is everything okay?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit. I perched on the edge of an antique chair, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, and told them about Lucy's diagnosis. I showed them the medical reports, explained the treatment, and finally, with my voice shaking, asked if they could help with the remaining $143,000. "It's her only chance," I said, unable to keep the desperation from my voice. "The doctors say we're running out of time." Robert and Diana exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Robert cleared his throat. "Elaine, I'm so sorry about Lucy, truly I am. But we've just put down a deposit on the Westlake property development. Our assets are tied up at the moment." Diana nodded sympathetically, though her eyes remained cold. "And we've just started planning Melissa's wedding," she added, as if that explained everything. "It's going to be the social event of the year. The Andersons, the Blakes, everyone who's anyone will be there." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "I understand. Maybe just a portion then? Anything would help at this point." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Let us look at our finances. and get back to you, okay? I left their mansion with cautious optimism. Surely once they reviewed their accounts, they'd find a way to help their only niece. But days passed with no word from Robert. When I called, Mrs. Everett informed me that they were out looking at wedding venues with Melissa. A week later, I received a text message from Robert. Elaine, we've reviewed everything and unfortunately can't help right now. Maybe try one of those online fundraisers. Diana says they're quite effective. That same evening, Diana posted photos on social media of them touring the Grand Lakeside Hotel, captioned, "Possible wedding venue for our princess. Nothing but the best for our Melissa. Wire blessed barn dream wedding." The venue rental alone, I later learned, cost $50,000 for a single day. Lucy's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next few weeks. Her once vibrant auburn hair fell out in clumps. Her skin became so pale it was almost translucent, and dark circles formed permanent residences under her once bright blue eyes. The hospital became our second home, with Lucy requiring more frequent stays as her kidneys struggled to function. I watched helplessly as nurses hooked her up to dialysis machines, the whirring and beeping of medical equipment providing the soundtrack to our nightmare. The medical bills piled up like autumn leaves, covering our kitchen table in an overwhelming blanket of financial obligations. I received collection notices and threatening calls from billing departments while sitting beside Lucy's hospital bed, trying to hide my growing panic behind reassuring smiles. "Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart," I'd tell her, stroking her thinning hair while mentally calculating how many more waitressing shifts I'd need to work to cover the latest round of tests. My crowdfunding campaign had stalled at $45,000, far short of our goal. Local news coverage brought a brief surge of donations, but public interest waned as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the next tragic story. I sold everything of value from our apartment, from my wedding ring to the antique bookcase my grandmother had left me. I pawned my car and started taking the bus, adding hours to my commute between jobs. I even considered bankruptcy, spending late nights researching whether it would affect Lucy's ongoing care or jeopardize our access to what treatment we could afford. Desperation drove me to make another attempt with Robert and Diana. This time, I didn't call ahead. I drove to their house in a borrowed car and waited in the driveway until Robert returned from work. His expression when he saw me standing there was a mixture of annoyance and guilt. "Elaine, this isn't a good time," he said, glancing nervously at the house where Diana might be watching. "Lucy's dying, Robert," I said bluntly, too exhausted for social niceties. "The doctors are giving her months, maybe weeks. I need your help, please." Robert's face softened momentarily before his features rearranged themselves into a mask of practiced concern. "I understand you're worried, but Diana and I simply can't right now. The wedding plans are in full swing and we've committed to covering everything. It's what Melissa deserves." "And what does Lucy deserve?" I asked, my voice breaking. "To die because her cousin needs a fairy tale wedding?" Robert's expression hardened. "You're being dramatic, Elaine. These experimental treatments, they're not guaranteed anyway. And frankly, it seems like poor financial planning on your part to not have better insurance or savings for emergencies." Before I could respond, Diana appeared in the doorway, her slim figure silhouetted against the warm light from inside their mansion. "Robert, who are you talking to?" she called, though I was certain she could see exactly who it was. Robert straightened his shoulders. "Just Elaine, dear. She was just leaving." Diana stepped outside, her designer heels clicking on the paved driveway. "Elaine, really, this constant asking is becoming inappropriate. We've told you we can't help. Right now. I'm sorry about Lucy, but perhaps you should be looking into comfort care instead of chasing expensive treatments." I stood there, stunned by her coldness, as she took Robert's arm and guided him inside, closing the door on me and my dying daughter without a backward glance. 1 week later, driven by maternal desperation and the sight of Lucy hooked to yet another machine, I made my final attempt. I discovered through social media that Robert, Diana, and their wedding planning committee were meeting at Oak Ridge Country Club to finalize catering details for Melissa's reception. The exclusive club, with its manicured lawns and marble columns, represented everything I couldn't provide for Lucy. I didn't have an appointment or a membership, but I managed to convince the receptionist that I was meeting my brother for an urgent family matter. Dressed in my work clothes, having come straight from my administrative job, I felt painfully out of place among the designer outfits and casual displays of wealth. I found them on the terrace overlooking the golf course, champagne flutes in hand, laughing with the wedding planner and caterer over a table spread with sample menus and floral arrangements. Diana spotted me first, her smile freezing on her face like a cracking porcelain mask. "Elaine," she said, her voice carrying a warning that everyone at the table immediately sensed. "What are you doing here?" I approached the table acutely, aware of the curious stares from the wedding professionals and club members at nearby tables. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I began, my rehearsed speech suddenly lodged in my throat. "Robert, Diana, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't our last option. Lucy's doctor called this morning. Her kidneys are failing. If we don't start the treatment within 2 weeks, I couldn't finish the sentence. Robert at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact with the now silent wedding planner. Diana, however, placed her champagne flute down with deliberate slowness and stood up, smoothing her designer dress. "Elaine," she said, her voice dripping with condescension and barely concealed anger, "this is completely inappropriate. We've already told you we can't help. We have a wedding to plan." She gestured at the scattered samples. "This venue alone is costing us a small fortune. Melissa deserves her special day." "And Lucy deserves to live," I countered, fighting to keep my voice steady. "She's 13 years old, Diana. Your niece." An uncomfortable silence fell over the terrace. From the corner of my eye, I could see people at nearby tables pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Diana's face flushed with either embarrassment or anger, possibly both. "Your poor planning isn't our emergency," she said, her words precise and cutting. "Maybe if you had made better choices in life, you wouldn't be in this situation." Robert finally spoke up, though his voice lacked conviction. "Diana, maybe we could—" Diana silenced him with a look. "No, Robert, we've discussed this. We simply don't have it in our budget right now." Then, unbelievably, she laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through me like a knife. "I mean, really, Elaine? $175,000? Do you have any idea what Melissa's wedding is costing us? We can't just divert funds because you've suddenly decided your daughter needs some experimental treatment that probably won't even work." The wedding planner and caterer exchanged uncomfortable glances, gathering their materials as if sensing the meeting was effectively over. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, publicly humiliated and utterly defeated. "She's your family," I whispered. "Your blood." Robert couldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at his hands. Diana's face showed no compassion, only irritation at the scene I was causing. "Security," she called to a uniformed man who had been hovering nearby since the conversation took a turn. My sister-in-law was just leaving. As the security guard gently but firmly escorted me through the country club, I could hear Diana's voice behind me, carrying clearly in the hushed atmosphere. "Some people just can't manage their lives properly," she was saying to the table, "always looking for handouts instead of solutions." The guard, perhaps taking pity on me, pretended not to notice my sobs as he walked me to my car. That night in the hospital was the darkest of my life. Lucy had been admitted with kidney failure, her small body swallowed up by the adult-sized hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that were now doing the work her organs couldn't manage. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across her sunken cheeks, and the constant beeping of monitors provided a grim rhythm to our vigil. I hadn't slept properly in days, dozing fitfully in the vinyl hospital chair that had become my bed, waking at every change in Lucy's breathing or machine alerts. Dr. Patel had been direct during his morning rounds, his kind eyes unable to soften the blow of his words. "Without the specialized treatment, we're looking at complete system failure within weeks, maybe days," he had said quietly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Carter, but we need to make some decisions about comfort care. Soon." The finality of his words had hollowed me out, leaving nothing but an empty shell of a mother who had failed her child in the most fundamental way. I couldn't save her. After all the extra shifts, the fundraisers, the begging, I had failed. I held Lucy's limp hand in mine, her skin cool and dry, and watched her labored breathing, counting each rise and fall of her chest like precious gems. I must have finally succumbed to exhaustion because I woke with a start when someone touched my shoulder. Elaine? Elaine Carter? I blinked up at a nurse I didn't recognize, momentarily disoriented. Yes, I managed, quickly looking at Lucy, to make sure nothing had changed. The nurse, a woman about my age with curly black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, smiled at me. I thought it was you. I'm Clara Jimenez. We were in Professor Denning's economics class together at State. It took my exhausted brain a moment to place her. Clara? Oh my God, it's been 15 years? She nodded, checking Lucy's IV and making notes on her chart. At least, I saw your name on the patient roster and had to come see if it was really you. Her eyes softened as she looked at Lucy. I've been reading her file. I'm so sorry about her condition. I nodded, too tired for the usual social platitudes. Clara worked efficiently around Lucy, adjusting monitors and checking readings with practiced hands. I actually work part-time with the Henderson Medical Research Foundation, she said casually as she recorded Lucy's vitals. They fund clinical trials for rare conditions, including autoimmune disorders like Lucy's. I straightened in my chair, fully awake now. Clinical trials? For Lucy's condition? Clara nodded. The foundation just approved a new round of patient funding for exactly the treatment Lucy needs. It wouldn't cover everything, but it could cover a significant portion. My heart, which had been dormant with despair just moments before, flickered to life with a dangerous spark of hope. How significant? Potentially up to 70%, Clara said. But the application period closes tomorrow and they select patients immediately after. The treatment starts next week for those accepted. What followed was a blur of activity. Clara helped me complete the application during her breaks, explaining medical terminology and suggesting the most impactful ways to present Lucy's case. We submitted it minutes before the midnight deadline and then began the agonizing wait. 3 days later, we received the news. Lucy had been accepted into the program. The foundation would cover $125,000 of the treatment cost, leaving us to find the remaining $50,000. It was still an enormous sum, but compared to the original amount, it suddenly seemed within reach. Dr. Patel, encouraged by this development, agreed to begin preliminary treatment while we secured the remaining funds. But where would I find $50,000 in a matter of days? I had sold everything of value, maxed out every credit card, and exhausted all conventional loan options. Then I remembered my mother's house, the modest 3-bedroom home where Robert and I had grown up. After our parents' death, we had rented it out, splitting the modest income. Eventually, Robert had wanted to sell it to invest in one of his development projects, but I had refused, feeling it was our last connection to our parents. He had bought out his half, leaving me as sole owner of a property worth approximately $60,000 in its current condition. It was my only inheritance, the only thing I had to pass on to Lucy someday. But what good was an inheritance if she wasn't alive to receive it? The decision was painful but clear. The house went on the market the next day, listed well below value for a quick sale. Selling my childhood home felt like ripping out a piece of my soul, but I signed the papers without hesitation, watching through blurred vision as my signature transferred ownership of the last physical connection to my parents to a young couple, expecting their first child. The realtor handed me a check for $58,000, and I drove straight to the hospital to make the final payment for Lucy's treatment. The first weeks of treatment were terrifying. Lucy's body, already weakened by months of illness, initially rebelled against the aggressive therapy. There were nights I sat by her bed, watching her temperature spike to alarming levels, praying to a God I wasn't sure I still believed in to spare my daughter. During one particularly frightening episode where Lucy's blood pressure dropped dangerously low, I found myself making bargains with the universe, promising anything in exchange for her survival. I worked myself to exhaustion, maintaining my administrative job during the day and continuing to wait tables 3 nights a week to cover our ongoing expenses. Our apartment was rarely used except for quick showers and occasional changes of clothes, as I spent every possible moment at the hospital. My boss at the investment firm, Mr. Harrington, showed unexpected compassion, allowing me flexible hours and occasionally dropping by the hospital with homemade meals from his wife. Other parents in the pediatric ward formed an impromptu support group, watching each other's children during bathroom breaks or coffee runs, sharing resources and small kindnesses that kept us all afloat in our ocean of worry. Meanwhile, through the disconnected lens of social media, I caught glimpses of Robert and Diana's world continuing unaffected by our struggle. Diana posted weekly updates about Melissa's wedding preparations, each more extravagant than the last. There were fittings at exclusive bridal salons, tastings at five-star restaurants, and consultations with florists who charged more for centerpieces than my monthly rent. One evening, while Lucy dozed after a particularly difficult treatment session, I scrolled through my phone to find Diana had shared photos of Melissa's bachelorette weekend in Paris, complete with champagne cruises on the Seine and private shopping excursions. The contrast between our realities was so stark it was almost laughable, a cosmic joke without a punchline. 3 months into Lucy's treatment, an elegant cream envelope arrived at our apartment, addressed in gold calligraphy. Inside was an invitation to Melissa's wedding, scheduled for the following month at the Grand Lakeside Hotel. A handwritten note from Diana was tucked inside. "We hope you and Lucy can attend. The registry information is enclosed. Despite our differences, family should be present for such occasions." I stared at the note, unable to process the breathtaking insensitivity it represented. They hadn't once visited Lucy in the hospital, hadn't called to check on her progress, yet expected us to celebrate their daughter's special day and bring a gift from their curated registry, where the lowest-priced item was a $300 serving platter. That night, sitting beside Lucy's hospital bed as she slept peacefully for the first time in months, her color slightly improved and her breathing steady, I tore the invitation into tiny pieces and let them fall into the trash bin like confetti, a private celebration of choosing my daughter over toxic family ties. 1 year later, Lucy sat on the edge of the examination table, swinging her legs impatiently as Dr. Patel reviewed her latest test results. At 14, she was still thin, but her cheeks had regained their healthy color and her hair had grown, back thicker than before, falling in auburn waves past her shoulders. "These numbers look remarkable," Dr. Patel said, genuine pleasure lighting his tired eyes. "Your kidney function is nearly normal, and your inflammatory markers are the lowest they've been since diagnosis. I think we can officially say the treatment was successful." Lucy's whoop of joy brought tears to my eyes as she launched herself at me for a hug, nearly toppling us both in her enthusiasm. We celebrated with ice cream at her favorite parlor, making plans for her return to school full-time after over a year of hospital visits and home tutoring. Life was slowly rebuilding itself around us piece by fragile piece. I had continued working at the investment firm, gradually taking on more responsibilities as I demonstrated an unexpected aptitude for financial planning. My background in teaching, combined with my personal experience navigating medical financial systems, gave me a unique perspective that clients appreciated. One afternoon, I was summoned to Mr. Harrington's office, certain I was about to be reprimanded for missing a deadline while taking Lucy to a follow-up appointment. Instead, I found him sitting with an elegantly dressed woman he introduced as Victoria Reynolds, a partner at Reynolds Wealth Management, one of the city's premier financial advisory firms. "Elaine," Mr. Harrington said, "Ms. Reynolds is looking for someone with your specific skills for their new family financial planning division." Victoria smiled warmly at me. "Thomas has told me about your remarkable journey and how you've managed to navigate an incredibly complex medical financial situation. We need advisors who understand real-world challenges, not just theoretical. Portfolio management." The job offer came with a salary that made me lightheaded, benefits that would fully cover Lucy's ongoing care, and a clear path to certification as a financial advisor. I accepted on the spot, my hand shaking as I signed the preliminary paperwork. That same week, I received a text from a former neighbor near my childhood home. She had spotted Robert driving through the old neighborhood, slowing down near what used to be our parents' house. I didn't think much of it at the time, focused instead on our new beginning. Lucy thrived upon returning to school, her experience giving her a maturity and perspective that drew others to her. She started a support group for teens dealing with chronic illnesses, using her story to inspire others facing similar battles. At home, we moved from our cramped apartment to a modest but comfortable townhouse closer to my new office and Lucy's school. Over the next 5 years, I excelled in my new career, developing a specialty in helping families prepare financially for medical crises. I completed my certification as a financial advisor and began building my own client portfolio, many referred by doctors and nurses who had treated Lucy. My experience had taught me to spot potential financial pitfalls that other advisors might miss, and clients appreciated my practical, empathetic approach to their concerns. Meanwhile, through casual conversations with former colleagues and occasional glimpses on social media, I became peripherally aware that Robert's business empire was showing cracks. The economic downturn had hit luxury real estate particularly hard, and several of his developments had stalled or been canceled entirely. Diana's social media posts became less frequent and more subdued, the lavish vacations and shopping sprees replaced by carefully staged family dinners and nostalgic throwbacks to better times. When Lucy received her college acceptance letter, along with a substantial merit scholarship, it felt like the final validation of our journey, proof that we had not only survived but thrived despite everything thrown our way. Standing in our kitchen, watching my healthy, confident daughter dance around with her acceptance letter, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. We had made it, without help from those who should have been our strongest supporters, and that knowledge gave me a quiet strength that no luxury or social status could ever provide. The irony of Robert's voicemail arriving on the same day as Lucy's 19th birthday wasn't lost on me. 6 years had passed since I'd last spoken to my brother. 6 years of building a new life from the ashes of our old one. Lucy was thriving in her sophomore year of college, majoring in pre-med with plans to become a pediatric specialist. I had been promoted to senior financial advisor at Reynolds Wealth Management, with my own office and a robust client list that kept me comfortably busy. The desperate tone in Robert's voice was so unfamiliar that I played the message twice to make sure it was really him. "Elaine, it's Robert. I know it's been a long time, and I have no right to ask. But I need to talk. To you. It's urgent. We're about to lose everything. Please call me back." My finger hovered over the delete button before curiosity got the better of me. I didn't call immediately, instead spending my evening celebrating Lucy's birthday with a small gathering of her friends at our favorite restaurant. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked up Robert's company online. What I found confirmed the hints I'd gathered over the years. Robert Carter Properties was facing multiple lawsuits from investors, had laid off most of its staff, and according to business news sources, was on the verge of bankruptcy. Further research revealed that their mansion had been listed for sale months ago and was still on the market, now with a significantly reduced asking price. Their social media accounts told a different story, with Diana still posting carefully curated images of dinner parties and charity events, maintaining the illusion of prosperity even as it crumbled around them. Professional curiosity drove me to dig deeper, using the financial analysis skills I'd developed over the years. Robert's company had made a series of increasingly risky investments, leveraging existing properties to finance new developments just before the market turned. When buyers pulled out of the luxury properties, the house of cards had begun to collapse. They had remortgaged their home to pump money into the failing business, and now, according to county records, foreclosure proceedings had begun. I finally returned Robert's call 3 days later, arranging to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes, a neutral territory for what would undoubtedly be an uncomfortable conversation. I arrived early, securing a corner table that offered some privacy. Robert entered 10 minutes late, nearly unrecognizable from the confident, polished businessman I remembered. His hair had grayed considerably, deep lines etched around his mouth, and eyes and his designer suit, once impeccably tailored, hung loosely on his frame. Diana followed behind him, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the strain of recent years. They hesitated when they saw me, perhaps surprised that I had actually come, before making their way to the table. "Thank you for meeting us," Robert began, his voice subdued. "I know we have no right to ask anything of you." Diana nodded stiffly, her eyes darting around the coffee shop as if worried someone might recognize them in their moment of humiliation. I waited silently, forcing them to continue. Robert cleared his throat, uncomfortable with my silence. "The thing is, Elaine, we're in trouble. Serious trouble." He explained what I had already discovered through my research: failed investments, mounting debts, the impending foreclosure. "We've tried everything," Diana interjected, her voice lacking its former imperious tone. "Loans, investors, even selling most of our assets. The bank is foreclosing in 30 days, Robert continued. We need about $200,000. to stop the proceedings and restructure our debt. The irony of the amount, so close to what I had once begged them for, hung in the air between us. We thought maybe, given your position at Reynolds, you might be able to help with a loan, or perhaps investment advice. Robert finished lamely. Diana, perhaps sensing the futility of their position, added with uncharacteristic humility. We know we have no right to ask, especially after everything. But we're desperate, Elaine. We have nowhere else to turn. Her carefully maintained facade cracked, tears welling in her eyes as she whispered, "We spent everything on appearances. The cars, the vacations, Melissa's wedding, all to maintain our social standing. We have nothing left, nothing but debts and regrets." The coffee between us grew cold as I sat in silence, absorbing their request and the stunning reversal of our positions. My first instinct, born from years of buried hurt, was vindication, a sharp satisfaction at seeing them humbled by circumstances of their own making. 6 years ago, they had laughed at my desperation as I begged for my daughter's life. Now they sat before me, begging for a financial lifeline I had the power to provide or withhold. The symmetry was almost poetic. I excused myself, stepping outside the coffee shop to call Lucy. Despite being in the middle of exam preparations, she answered immediately. "Everything okay, Mom?" Her voice, strong and vibrant, was a reminder of everything we'd overcome together. I explained the situation in measured terms, not wanting to influence her with my own complicated emotions. "What do you think I should do?" I asked finally. "They refuse to help save your life, Lucy. Why should I help save their house?" There was a long pause before Lucy responded, her words carrying a wisdom beyond her 19 years. "Mom, their actions showed who they are. Your actions will show who you are. Whatever you decide, don't let it be about revenge. That would give them power over you they don't deserve." Her simple insight cut through my conflicted emotions like a beam of light through darkness. When I returned to the table, Robert and Diana watched me anxiously, clearly expecting rejection. "I won't give you a loan," I said finally, watching. Their faces fall. "But I will help you, on my terms." I proceeded to outline a structured arrangement. I would negotiate with their bank using my professional contacts to halt the immediate foreclosure. I would help them develop a realistic financial recovery plan, including downsizing to a home they could actually afford and restructuring Robert's business to focus on sustainable projects rather than luxury developments. In exchange, they would attend financial counseling sessions with me, follow a strict budget, and most importantly, volunteer regularly at the children's hospital where Lucy had received her treatment. "You need to understand what families go through when medical disasters strike," I explained. "You need to see what real problems look like, not just social inconveniences." Diana's initial resistance was visible in her tightened jaw, but Robert placed a restraining hand on her arm. "We accept your terms," he said quietly. "All of them. And Elaine. I'm sorry. We should have helped Lucy. There hasn't been a day I haven't regretted our decision." Diana's apology came more reluctantly, but perhaps more honestly for that. "I was so focused on appearances, on what people would think," she admitted. "I couldn't see past Melissa's wedding to what really mattered. Watching our world collapse has been educational." Over the following months, I worked with them professionally, maintaining emotional boundaries while helping them rebuild their financial foundation. True to my word, I used my connections to halt the foreclosure and negotiate more favorable terms with their creditors. Robert proved surprisingly adaptable, embracing a more modest business model focused on affordable housing developments that actually thrived in the changing economic climate. Diana struggled more with their reduced circumstances but found unexpected fulfillment in her hospital volunteer work, eventually becoming a patient advocate for families navigating medical financial systems. Our personal relationship thawed gradually, beginning with awkward family dinners that evolved into more comfortable gatherings. Lucy, with her remarkable capacity for forgiveness, helped bridge the gap, sharing stories of her college experiences and medical ambitions. When she invited Robert and Diana to her white coat ceremony 2 years later, their genuine pride in her accomplishments felt like the closing of a painful chapter in our family history. One evening, as Lucy and I sat on the porch of our home watching the sunset, she asked me if I regretted helping Robert and Diana after what they'd done. No, I answered truthfully. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed to do it for myself, to know that hardship hadn't hardened me beyond recognition. Lucy nodded, understanding without further explanation. You know what I've learned from all this, Mom? She said, leaning her head against my shoulder like she used to do as a child. Sometimes the people who refuse to give you a lifeline are the ones who end up needing it most. But true wealth isn't about money. It's about having the grace to help others even when they didn't help you. As the golden light faded from the sky, I reflected on our journey from desperation to strength, from abandonment to community, from resentment to a hard-won peace. We had lost a house but built a home. We had been denied help but found support in unexpected places. And most importantly, we had learned that true wealth lies not in what you have, but in what you're willing to give when it truly matters. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about helping someone who once refused to help you? What would you have done in my place? Sometimes life's greatest tests aren't about surviving hardship, but about how we respond when given the power to either heal or hurt others. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might be facing their own challenges with family relationships or difficult decisions. Remember, in the end, we're defined not by what happens to us, but by how we choose to respond. Wishing you strength, wisdom, and peace on your own journey.
My name is Samantha Reed, and I am 32 years old. The mocking laughter around our Thanksgiving table cut deeper than anyone knew as my relatives belittled my cute little boutique. If only they could see the truth. While my mother Eleanor proudly discussed her executive position at Meridian Enterprises, she remained completely unaware that I secretly controlled Pinnacle Retail Group, now valued at billions. As everyone reached for pumpkin pie, her phone buzzed with a takeover notice bearing my name. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a like and subscribe to hear how I built an empire right under their noses. Ever since I was 8 years old, I dreamed of building something extraordinary. Not the typical childhood fantasies of becoming an astronaut or veterinarian. I wanted to create something that would change how people shopped. My earliest memory of this passion sparked during a shopping trip with my mother when I noticed how impersonal the experience felt. Why don't stores know what customers actually want? I asked, clutching my little notepad where I'd already begun sketching storefront designs. Throughout middle school, my entrepreneurial spirit only grew stronger. While other kids spent weekends at the mall hanging out, I observed traffic patterns, customer behaviors, and inventory turnover. By 14, I'd created detailed business models in color-coded binders that my parents initially found endearing. Mom would ruffle my hair and call me her little CEO whenever I presented my latest retail concept at the dinner table. My father, Gregory, an accountant by profession, taught me about profit margins and business expenses. Samantha has a gift, he'd tell relatives at family gatherings. She understands value in ways adults struggle to grasp. The support felt nurturing, a greenhouse where my ambitions could flourish without premature judgment. High school brought academic achievements alongside my business obsession. I graduated valedictorian while running a successful online jewelry store from my bedroom. The college applications practically wrote themselves. Northwestern University offered me a partial scholarship to their prestigious business program, where I thrived among like-minded innovators. Those 4 years shaped my vision into something concrete. My professors recognized something different in my approach to retail, not just selling products, but creating personalized experiences that customers couldn't find online. My senior thesis on experiential retail in the digital age won the department's highest honors and caught the attention of several major retailers who offered me internships. I accepted positions at 3 different companies, working nights and weekends to understand their models from the inside. Macy's taught me inventory management. A boutique consulting firm showed me the power of data analytics in predicting consumer behavior. A brief stint at Amazon revealed the weaknesses in purely digital retail models. Each experience became another piece in my growing blueprint. After graduation, I surprised everyone by turning down lucrative job offers. Instead, I used my modest savings of $30,000 to lease a tiny storefront in a Chicago strip mall. The space, barely 800 square feet, became the first location of what I called curated, a boutique focused on personalized shopping experiences driven by sophisticated customer data. "This is just temporary," my mother assured relatives at Christmas that year. "She's getting it out of her system before joining a real company." Her words stung, but I smiled through them, knowing my concept had something special. My store combined the best elements of online shopping, personalization, convenience, data-driven inventory, with the irreplaceable human touch of in-person retail. That first year proved challenging but validating. I worked 16-hour days, personally assisting customers while developing proprietary software that tracked preferences beyond simple purchase history. My system analyzed browsing patterns, time spent with certain items, and even facial responses to different products. Privacy concerns necessitated transparency, so I created an opt-in program that offered discounts in exchange for this valuable data. 6 months in, the store reached profitability. Modest, but remarkable for a retail startup. By month 9, word of mouth had created a dedicated customer base who valued the uniquely curated selections awaiting them. Local business publications took notice, and a small feature in Chicago Business Monthly brought increased foot traffic. The pivotal meeting with Victoria Montgomery happened during month 11. She walked into my store, elegantly dressed in a tailored navy suit that immediately signaled her corporate background. I assumed she was another curious executive studying the quaint operation of a millennial entrepreneur. Instead, she spent 2 hours asking insightful questions about my expansion model and proprietary systems. "You've created something revolutionary," she said as I locked up that evening. "But it's trapped in 800 square feet of retail space." Victoria had built and sold 2 successful tech companies and was looking for her next project. Her expertise in scaling operations complemented my retail vision perfectly. After weeks of discussions over coffee and spreadsheets, she invested $500,000 for a 20% stake in my company. The partnership provided not just capital but mentorship from someone who had navigated the treacherous waters of rapid business expansion. With Victoria's investment, I secured leases for 2 additional locations in Chicago's affluent neighborhoods. Each store maintained the core concept while targeting slightly different demographics. The original store catered to young professionals, while the North Side location focused on established executives, and the Lincoln Park store specialized in family-oriented offerings. By the end of year 2, quarterly revenue had quadrupled, and our customer retention rate hit an unheard of 92% in an industry where 30% was considered excellent. Local success created a springboard for regional expansion, and Victoria and I began scouting locations in neighboring states. Every indicator pointed toward extraordinary growth potential. Industry analysts who visited our stores left impressed by both the concept and execution. One retail consultant told me, "You've solved the biggest challenge facing brick-and-mortar retail today, giving customers a reason to leave their computers." The future looked limitless, fueled by innovation and validated by growing revenue. Little did I know that my greatest opposition wouldn't come from competitors, but from the people closest to me. The first hints of family skepticism emerged during Sunday dinners at my parents' suburban home. What began as gentle ribbing about my little shop experiment gradually transformed into something more cutting. My father remained supportive, but my mother's attitude shifted as her own career at Meridian Enterprises accelerated. Eleanor Reed had joined Meridian as a mid-level marketing executive when I was in high school. By the time I opened my first store, she had climbed to director of corporate communications. Her world revolved around quarterly reports, shareholder meetings, and corporate hierarchies. Success, in her paradigm, meant corner offices and company cars, tangible symbols my modest boutique couldn't provide. Meridian just acquired another subsidiary, she announced one Sunday, serving her signature roast chicken. The CEO mentioned me specifically in the all-hands meeting. "They're considering me for vice president next year." "That's wonderful, Mom," I replied sincerely. My second location broke even last month, 3 weeks ahead of projections. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. That's nice, dear. More potatoes? The conversation moved on to my cousin Heather's new position at a prestigious accounting firm. The dismissal stung, but I attributed it to my mother's excitement about her own accomplishments rather than disinterest in mine. Then came Thanksgiving, 3 years into my entrepreneurial journey. Our family tradition brought together the extended Reed clan at my grandmother Margaret's sprawling Victorian home in Evanston. Relatives arrived from across the Midwest, carrying casserole dishes and years of accumulated judgments. Cousin Heather, once my childhood confidant, had recently accepted a financial analyst position at Meridian, working under my mother's admiring gaze. As we arranged silverware before dinner, she asked about my boutique situation with unmistakable condescension. "Still playing shop owner?" she asked, adjusting a crystal water glass. "Mom mentioned you might finally be looking for positions with established companies." "Actually, we're opening our 4th location next month," I replied, maintaining my composure. "Revenue is up 63% year over year." "How quaint," she smiled, patting my hand. "But seriously, Eleanor mentioned some openings in Meridian's marketing department. Great benefits, stock options. Grown-up job stuff." Before I could respond, Uncle Maxwell entered the dining room, scotch in hand despite the early hour. A retired investment banker with an exaggerated sense of his own financial acumen, he'd appointed himself the family's economic oracle. "There's my retail maverick," he boomed, slinging an arm around my shoulders. "How's the little shop doing? Breaking even yet?" "We're well past that, Uncle Max. In fact." "Listen," he interrupted, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that everyone could still hear. "This economy's shifting. Retail's dying. Let me give you some free financial advice, valuable stuff, mind you. Take whatever modest success you've built and leverage it into a real corporate position. Eleanor could put in a word at Meridian. No shame in admitting the experiment has run its course." Throughout dinner, similar comments peppered the conversation. Aunt Patricia wondered aloud if playing store fulfilled my creative needs. Cousin Thomas, a pharmaceutical sales representative, explained retail's grim future to me as though I hadn't researched industry trends extensively. Each comment landed like a small paper cut, individually minor but cumulatively painful. Most surprising was my mother's participation. When Uncle Maxwell asked about my 5-year plan, suggesting it must involve getting a proper job eventually, Eleanor nodded along. "We're hoping she'll consider her options soon," she said, as if I weren't sitting 3 chairs away. "There's still time to build a real career." The betrayal crystallized something inside me. On the drive home, I made 2 decisions that would alter everything. First, I would stop sharing details about my business with family. Second, I would create deliberate separation between my personal and professional lives. "They don't deserve to know," I told Victoria over coffee the following Monday. "If they can't recognize success unless it fits their narrow definition, why keep trying to convince them?" Victoria's experience proved invaluable here too. "Companies compartmentalize information all the time," she noted. "Consider this a need-to-know situation, and they don't need to know." This strategy coincided with a critical juncture in our business. A regional developer had approached us about anchoring a new luxury shopping district in downtown Chicago. The opportunity would quadruple our flagship store's square footage and place us alongside internationally recognized brands. The catch: it required $7 million in capital investment. Victoria and I spent weeks analyzing the opportunity. The numbers made sense, but required leveraging everything we'd built. I would need to live on a minimal salary for at least 18 months while we scaled operations. The decision would mean postponing personal luxuries that might have finally impressed my status-conscious family. "Imagine their faces if you showed up to Christmas in a Tesla," Victoria joked during our deliberations. "Is that worth compromising our growth strategy?" The answer came easily. I chose the business over external validation, signing the expansion agreement on my 27th birthday. That decision marked the true beginning of my double life: successful entrepreneur to the business world, underachieving shopkeeper to my family. The emotional toll proved heavier than anticipated. Sunday dinners became exercises in selective truth-telling. I'd listen to my mother extol her corporate triumphs while minimizing my own accomplishments. Sometimes I'd catch my father watching me with a puzzled expression, sensing the omissions in my carefully edited updates. One Sunday, as I helped with dishes, he asked quietly, "Are you really doing okay financially, Samantha? Your mother worries." The question revealed how effectively I'd hidden my success. My company had just cleared its first million in monthly revenue, yet my parents believed I might be struggling. Part of me wanted to show him our financial statements, to see pride replace concern in his eyes. Instead, I assured him things were stable enough and changed the subject. The pattern was set. At family gatherings, I became the slightly pitted relative who couldn't quite launch a real career. In boardrooms and business meetings, I transformed into the retail innovator revolutionizing the industry. The contrast created a compartmentalization that seeped into every aspect of my life. As Curated expanded beyond our initial locations, Victoria and I made a strategic decision that would facilitate my separate lives. We created Pinnacle Retail Group as a parent company, with each individual store operating under the Curated brand. This corporate structure allowed me to conduct business without my surname appearing prominently on corporate documents. Not technically hiding, but certainly not advertising my connection to the growing retail empire. Our expansion accelerated beyond even our ambitious projections. Within 18 months, we acquired leases for 10 additional locations across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Each store maintained our core personalization concept while incorporating regional preferences identified through our increasingly sophisticated data analytics. The flagship store in Chicago's Magnificent Mile shopping district became our innovation laboratory. We installed cutting-edge technology that recognized returning customers, with their permission, and alerted personal shoppers to their arrival. Inventory systems automatically adjusted based on real-time purchasing patterns. The location quickly became a case study for retail industry publications, though I declined most interview requests, sending Victoria instead. Throughout this period of explosive growth, the annual Thanksgiving ritual continued, with increasing discomfort. Each year brought new variations on the same theme, condescension wrapped in family concern. The year we expanded to 15 stores, Uncle Maxwell cornered me before dinner. "Samantha, I've been looking into these retail incubator programs. They help small business owners transition their experience into corporate positions. I've put your name in with a buddy at Target headquarters." The following year, as we prepared to open our 20th location, Aunt Patricia commented loudly during dinner, "It's so admirable how Samantha sticks with her little boutique despite all the economic headwinds. Such determination." This while our company prepared for a private equity valuation exceeding $100 million. Most painful was the Thanksgiving after my mother's promotion to senior vice president at Meridian Enterprises. The family celebrated with champagne before dinner, toasting Eleanor's corporate achievement. During a lull in conversation, Cousin Heather turned to me with exaggerated sympathy. "Don't worry, Sam. Not everyone peaks in their 30s. Mom started her best career after 40, remember?" The comment drew knowing chuckles around the table. My mother, flushed with champagne and success, added, "Samantha just needs to recognize her talents could be better utilized in a structured environment." The conversation devolved into relatives suggesting various corporate positions that might rescue me from retail entrepreneurship. Meanwhile, Pinnacle Retail Group continued its meteoric rise far from my family's awareness. We launched an online platform that integrated seamlessly with our physical stores, allowing customers to begin their personalized shopping experience digitally before completing it in person. The innovation increased our average transaction value by 42%. Victoria orchestrated a Series B funding round that brought in $30 million from venture capital firms impressed by our consistent growth and profitability. The investment accelerated our expansion into new markets, with stores opening in upscale shopping districts across the country. As CEO, I relocated our corporate headquarters from our original modest office to a gleaming downtown Chicago building with our logo prominently displayed across the top 10 floors. Over 200 employees now supported operations across multiple states, with dedicated teams for technology development, customer experience, and data analytics. Our first major competitor acquisition came when a regional boutique chain with similar concepts but inferior execution faced bankruptcy. We purchased their 12 locations for pennies on the dollar, rebranded them under the curated banner, and implemented our systems. Within 6 months, these locations reversed their losses and contributed positively to our bottom line. Industry recognition arrived in the form of awards I couldn't acknowledge to my family. Retail Innovation of the Year. Fast Company's list of disruptive businesses. Forbes 30 Under 30. Each accolade remained carefully hidden from family conversations, creating an increasingly isolated personal existence. Dating became nearly impossible given the compartmentalization. Potential partners either knew me as the successful CEO, raising questions about my strained family relationships, or met me through personal connections and couldn't understand my apparent lack of career ambition. After several relationships collapsed under the weight of these contradictions, I retreated into my work. The isolation grew proportionally with Pinnacle's success. During one particularly difficult period, I worked 20 consecutive days without a genuine personal connection outside of business contexts. Victoria noticed my withdrawal and staged an intervention over dinner at her Lakeshore Drive apartment. "You've created a corporate juggernaut and a personal prison," she observed, pouring another glass of Cabernet. "Is proving them wrong worth sacrificing your authentic life?" I had no answer that satisfied either of us. The question lingered as we continued our expansion strategy, acquiring premium retail space in every major market nationwide. By my 31st birthday, Pinnacle Retail Group operated 67 stores across 23 states, employed over 800 people, and generated annual revenue exceeding $400 million. Last year's Thanksgiving represented the breaking point. After dinner, as relatives migrated to the living room for football and dessert, Uncle Maxwell cornered me near the liquor cabinet. "Samantha," he began, lowering his voice to a paternalistic rumble, "your parents would never say this, but they're worried sick about your financial future. No retirement planning, no investment strategy, just pouring everything into a retail concept that's..." He waved his hand dismissively, charming but ultimately unsustainable. "I've connected you with my financial advisor. Free consultation. Get your affairs in order before it's too late." That night, driving back to my penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, something fundamental shifted. The carefully maintained separation between my worlds suddenly felt not just painful, but absurd. Success, without acknowledgement, had become a hollow victory. Yet the prospect of revealing everything after years of secrecy seemed equally impossible. I had no idea that circumstances would soon force my hand in ways I couldn't have anticipated. January brought the news that would ultimately shatter my compartmentalized existence. A major private equity firm completed Pinnacle Retail Group's valuation ahead of a potential minority stake sale. Their conclusion sent shockwaves through the retail industry. $1.2 billion. Our growth trajectory, proprietary technology, and consistent profitability had created a valuation that exceeded even Victoria's optimistic projections. The morning after receiving this news, my mother called, her voice uncharacteristically strained. "Bad news at the office," she explained without preamble. "Meridian stock is tanking. The board called an emergency meeting yesterday." I gripped my phone tighter, immediately understanding the implications. Meridian Enterprises had been struggling with integration issues following several poorly executed acquisitions. Market analysts had been questioning their business model for quarters, but I never expected a crisis to develop so quickly. "How bad is it?" I asked, already opening my laptop to check financial news. "Bad enough that they're discussing potential buyers," Eleanor admitted. The resignation in her voice revealed more than her words. 30 years building my career, and now some corporate raider will probably dismantle everything we've created. The conversation continued with my mother sharing details about emergency executive sessions and contingency planning. Throughout, I maintained the facade of sympathetic daughter rather than revealing my immediate recognition of a strategic opportunity. After hanging up, I called Victoria. Meridian's in play, I said without greeting. They're looking for buyers. Your mother's company? Victoria clarified, immediately grasping the significance. That's quite a coincidence. Is it though? I questioned. Their acquisition strategy has been fundamentally flawed for years. They've been purchasing market share without strategic integration. The balance sheet problems were inevitable. We spent the next hour analyzing Meridian's public financial information. The company represented a potential strategic acquisition for Pinnacle's expanding operations. Their distribution infrastructure alone would accelerate our growth plans by approximately 18 months. The retail properties in their portfolio, while underperforming under current management, aligned perfectly with our expansion strategy. You realize what this means, Victoria said eventually. If we pursue this, your family situation becomes untenable. The observation hung between us, acknowledging the impossible position such an acquisition would create. Yet the business case was undeniable. After 3 days of intensive analysis with our executive team, I authorized our investment bankers to prepare an acquisition offer for Meridian Enterprises. The weeks that followed unfolded with intense activity hidden behind my usual veil of privacy. Meetings with financial institutions secured the necessary capital structure. Our legal team drafted acquisition documents with multiple contingency provisions. Valuation experts assessed Meridian's true worth beneath the struggling stock price. Throughout this period, Sunday dinners continued their painful pattern. My mother increasingly discussed Meridian's precarious position while I maintained my role as supportive daughter with limited business acumen. The cognitive dissonance reached absurd levels when she actually asked if I understood basic business terms she referenced. A hostile takeover means the acquisition happens without board approval, she explained unnecessarily during one dinner. But even a friendly acquisition would mean significant leadership changes. That sounds stressful, I replied, the understatement of my career. By late October, our acquisition strategy was fully developed. The offer would become public the week after Thanksgiving, giving me one last family gathering before my carefully constructed separate lives inevitably collapsed. As Thanksgiving approached, anxiety transformed my usually methodical approach to business. I reviewed the acquisition documents repeatedly, searching for alternatives that might somehow preserve the status quo. None existed. Success demanded disruption of comfortable patterns, in business and family alike. This year's Thanksgiving promised particular discomfort. Eleanor had been uncharacteristically vulnerable in recent calls, sharing fears about her professional future as Meridian's situation deteriorated. The knowledge that I controlled that future, without her awareness, created a moral complexity I struggled to reconcile. The gathering began like previous years, arriving at Grandmother Margaret's house, exchanging superficial pleasantries, offering to help in the kitchen. Uncle Maxwell arrived with a new Mercedes. He made sure everyone noticed. Cousin Heather brought her husband Bradford, a junior executive at a pharmaceutical company she referenced approximately every 7 minutes in conversation. Dinner followed the established script. My father asked genuinely about my well-being. My mother mentioned Meridian's challenges, with careful corporate discretion. Relatives inquired about my shop, with thinly disguised condescension. I deflected with practiced vagueness. The mockery escalated during the main course when Aunt Patricia asked about my holiday inventory strategy. Before I could answer, Uncle Maxwell interrupted with unexpected vitriol. For God's sake, Patricia, stop encouraging this fantasy. Samantha's wasted 10 years playing shopkeeper while her peers built actual careers. Eleanor's company is facing bankruptcy while her daughter sells scarves to bored housewives. The table fell momentarily silent before Cousin Heather added, "It's not just scarves, Uncle Max. She sells those scented candles too, right, Samantha?" Laughter rippled around the table, missing only my father and grandmother. My mother, rather than defending me, offered a weak smile that cut deeper than the mockery. "Samantha knows we just want what's best for her future," she said, patting my hand with genuine condescension. The conversation mercifully shifted to Meridian's situation. Eleanor explained that employees expected an announcement about the company's future imminently, possibly even during the holiday weekend. The board's been meeting with potential buyers, she explained, tension evident in her voice. We're hoping for someone who understands our corporate culture rather than just dismantling everything for parts. As servers cleared dinner plates and brought dessert, phones around the table began buzzing simultaneously. Eleanor frowned, extracting her device from her purse. That's strange. Company-wide email at 7 p.m. on Thanksgiving. I maintained a neutral expression while calculating the timing error by our communications team. The announcement had been scheduled for 9 p.m. after most family gatherings concluded. Someone had triggered the automated system early. Eleanor's expression transformed as she read the message, color draining from her face. Her eyes lifted from the phone to find mine, confusion giving way to disbelief as she processed the information. Pinnacle Retail Group has acquired majority shareholding in Meridian Enterprises, she read aloud, voice trembling slightly. Effective immediately. She stopped, swallowing visibly before continuing. Effective immediately. Operations will be overseen by Pinnacle CEO Samantha Reed during the transition period. The silence that followed contained a decade of misunderstandings. Uncle Maxwell's fork clattered against china. Cousin Heather's wine glass froze midway to her lips. My father looked between my mother and me with growing comprehension. There must be some mistake. My mother finally managed, eyes never leaving mine. Another Samantha Reed. I took a slow, deliberate breath before responding. No mistake, ma'am. I am the CEO of Pinnacle Retail Group. We've just acquired Meridian Enterprises for $640 million. The stunned silence lasted approximately 12 seconds before erupting into chaotic crosstalk. Uncle Maxwell demanded explanations while examining the email on his own phone. Cousin Heather repeatedly murmured, "That's not possible," with diminishing conviction. My father alternated between confusion and dawning pride. Throughout the commotion, my mother remained unnaturally still, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something resembling betrayal. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the careful neutrality she typically reserved for difficult corporate negotiations. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private, she suggested, already rising from her chair. Actually, I replied with newfound conviction, I think we've had enough privacy. 10 years of it, in fact. The statement halted the chaotic reactions. I stood, suddenly aware of the power shift occurring in real time. For a decade, I'd played the role of underachieving daughter at this table. That role had abruptly, irrevocably ended. Pinnacle Retail Group currently operates 83 stores across 30 states. I began, voice steady. We employ over 1,200 people and generated $620 million in revenue last year. The little boutique you've been mocking started as one store but now includes our flagship 8-story location on Michigan Avenue that serves over 10,000 customers weekly. Uncle Maxwell attempted to interrupt, but I continued without acknowledging him. Our proprietary customer experience technology has revolutionized personalized retail. We've been profitable every quarter for 7 consecutive years. And yes, we just purchased Meridian Enterprises in a transaction that closed yesterday. Cousin Heather found her voice first. But why didn't you tell anyone? Why let us think you were struggling with some small business? The question deserved honesty. Because from the moment I opened my first store, most of you treated my work as a hobby rather than a career. You dismissed my passion as temporary, my business as unsustainable. After years of condescension, I stopped sharing my success with people who couldn't recognize it. My mother finally broke her silence. You deliberately deceived your family for years. You sat at this table listening to me worry about Meridian while knowing you planned to acquire it. The acquisition opportunity only emerged recently, I clarified. But yes, I've maintained separate personal and professional lives because that felt easier than constantly defending my choices to people who should have supported them unconditionally. Uncle Maxwell, never comfortable outside the spotlight, attempted to recalibrate his position. Well, obviously we always knew you had tremendous potential, Samantha. I've been saying for years that you have exceptional business instincts. The transparent revision of history might have angered me previously. Now it merely confirmed the correctness of my past decisions. Strange. I specifically remember you offering to connect me with financial advisors because you were worried sick about my lack of retirement planning last Thanksgiving. His face flushed crimson as other relatives turned toward him. The decades of authority he'd wielded at family gatherings evaporated in seconds. Without responding directly, he reached for the wine bottle with uncharacteristic humility. Cousin Heather approached next, her expression oscillating between embarrassment and calculation. So, I guess this means you're technically my boss now? Since I work in Meridian's finance department. The question highlighted another complexity I hadn't fully considered. Dozens of relatives, connected through Eleanor, worked throughout Meridian's corporate structure. Their professional futures now depended on my business decisions. Organizational changes will happen thoughtfully, I assured her, addressing the entire table. This isn't about personal vendettas. It's about creating a stronger combined company. My father, who had remained silent throughout the revelations, finally approached. Unlike the others, his expression showed no calculation or revision, only genuine wonder and pride. I always knew you were building something special, he said quietly. I just never imagined the scale. His words unlocked something I'd suppressed through years of compartmentalization, the desire for parental recognition. The professional accomplishments, industry accolades, and financial success suddenly felt secondary to the simple acknowledgement in my father's eyes. The evening transitioned into something resembling a corporate briefing as relatives peppered me with questions about Pinnacle's operations. I answered selectively, maintaining appropriate confidentiality around sensitive business matters while revealing enough to establish my expertise beyond question. My mother remained uncharacteristically quiet, processing the dual revelations of her company's acquisition and her daughter's hidden success. As the gathering slowly dispersed, she requested a private conversation on the enclosed porch. "Why didn't you trust me enough to share this?" she asked once we were alone, vulnerability replacing her earlier shock. The question deserved careful consideration. It wasn't initially about trust. When I started, I was genuinely building something small that grew beyond my early projections. By the time Pinnacle became significant, you and others had established such a clear pattern of dismissing my work that revealing the truth seemed impossible without seeming either boastful or vindictive. She absorbed this with visible discomfort. And the Meridian acquisition? Was that revenge for years of misunderstanding? It was business, I replied honestly. Meridian's distribution infrastructure and real estate holdings complement our expansion strategy perfectly. The synergies are obvious to anyone analyzing both companies objectively. A week after Thanksgiving, I invited key family members to tour Pinnacle's corporate headquarters. The visit served multiple purposes, demonstrating the legitimate scale of operations, establishing clear professional boundaries, and beginning the process of integrating family relationships with my authentic professional identity. Their reactions to the gleaming offices, staffed by hundreds of employees clearly respectful of my leadership, completed the reversal of our previous dynamic. Uncle Maxwell, witnessing my executive team's deference and the sophisticated operation humming around us, finally abandoned any pretense of financial superiority. Cousin Heather, seeing her Meridian position within the larger corporate structure, adopted a newly professional demeanor lacking any trace of previous condescension. The media coverage following the acquisition announcement brought additional validation. Industry publications detailed the retail wunderkind who had built Pinnacle from a single boutique to a billion-dollar enterprise. Financial analysts praised the strategic synergies between the companies. Several profiles specifically noted the unusual privacy I'd maintained throughout Pinnacle's growth, though none discovered the family dynamic underlying that choice. Most meaningful was a private conversation with my mother 3 weeks after the acquisition. She requested a meeting at my office rather than during family dinner, signaling her recognition of our new professional relationship. "I owe you an apology," she began, perched uncomfortably on the edge of a chair across from my desk. "Not just for underestimating your business acumen, but for failing to support your vision when you needed it most." The admission represented significant personal growth from a woman who rarely acknowledged mistakes. Why was it so difficult to see value in what I was building? I asked, genuinely curious after years of wondering. Because it didn't fit the template of success I understood, she admitted. Corporate advancement followed clear metrics and hierarchies I recognized. What you created seemed foreign, without the familiar markers of achievement I'd been conditioned to respect. The conversation marked the beginning of reconciliation, though the relationship had fundamentally transformed. We would need to build something new on the ruins of old assumptions, a process requiring patience and mutual vulnerability. The months following the acquisition brought necessary but difficult conversations with relatives who had previously dismissed my work. Each required establishing new boundaries based on mutual respect rather than familial obligation. Some adjusted more gracefully than others to the shifted dynamic. Uncle Maxwell's attempt to discuss potential investment opportunities received polite but firm redirection. Aunt Patricia's sudden interest in my business expertise warranted similar boundaries. Most transparent were distant relatives suddenly discovering our special connection while seeking employment within the expanded company. These interactions reinforced the wisdom of my previous privacy while validating the necessity of finally ending it. The temporary discomfort of revelation had purchased authentic relationships moving forward, an investment already yielding returns beyond financial measurement. 6 months after the Thanksgiving revelation, both Pinnacle Retail Group and my family relationships had evolved into something I scarcely could have imagined a year earlier. The corporate integration progressed smoothly, with Meridian's operations complementing Pinnacle's expansion strategy even better than our models predicted. More surprising was the transformation in family dynamics as relatives adjusted to the reality of my professional identity. Sunday dinners resumed, with dramatically different conversational patterns. Gone were the condescending inquiries about my little shop. Instead, relatives listened attentively when I discussed business challenges, occasionally offering genuinely useful perspectives. The authenticity refreshed relationships grown stale through years of performative interactions. Most significant was the evolution in my relationship with Eleanor. After careful consideration, I created a specialized role leveraging her communications expertise across the expanded organization. The position honored her professional capabilities while establishing appropriate reporting structures that maintained corporate governance. I never imagined working for my daughter, she admitted during our weekly strategy lunch. But I'm learning more about modern retail communications in months than I did in years at Meridian. Her willingness to adapt impressed everyone, particularly given the status she'd previously attached to her executive title. She approached the role with unexpected humility, asking questions and absorbing new methodologies without defensiveness. The transformation revealed character depths I'd underestimated through years of strained interaction. The professional world finally acknowledged what I'd built with formal recognition. Retail Innovation Awards celebrated our customer experience technology. Industry publications featured our expansion strategy as a case study in sustainable growth. The culmination came with my inclusion on the cover of Forbes, the accompanying profile detailing both Pinnacle's rise and the unusual circumstances of its private development. "The Stealth Billionaire," read the headline, capturing both the financial milestone and the deliberate privacy that had characterized my journey. The article required discussing the family dynamic I'd previously kept separate from my professional identity. I maintained privacy partly from strategic choice and partly from personal necessity, I explained to the journalist. Building something revolutionary requires protection from early criticism, whether from competitors or from well-meaning people applying conventional wisdom to unconventional concepts. The public profile generated thousands of messages from young entrepreneurs facing similar challenges. Their stories of family skepticism, gender-based dismissal, and the struggle for early validation reflected my own experience with remarkable consistency. Responding to this unexpected community became a personal priority alongside corporate responsibilities. The professional achievements, while satisfying, paled against the personal growth occurring simultaneously. Years of compartmentalization had created emotional patterns requiring deliberate unlearning. A breakthrough came unexpectedly during a charity gala where I met Michael Donovan, an architectural engineer specializing in sustainable commercial spaces. Our conversation began professionally. His firm had designed several shopping centers housing pinnacle stores, but quickly revealed mutual interests beyond business. Unlike previous relationships strained by my compartmentalized lives, this connection started with complete transparency about both my professional position and family history. "That must have been an interesting Thanksgiving," he observed after hearing a condensed version of the revelation. His understated response, free from either intimidation or excessive fascination with my success, signaled emotional intelligence I'd found rare in potential partners. The relationship developed organically over subsequent months, neither accelerated by professional convenience nor hindered by hidden truths. For the first time, I experienced the possibility of partnership without performance or concealment, a freedom I hadn't recognized as missing until experiencing its presence. Victoria, whose mentorship had guided me through building Pinnacle, observed the changes with characteristic insight during our weekly strategy session. "You've finally integrated your lives," she noted. "The Samantha in boardrooms matches the Samantha at family dinners, matches the Samantha dating Michael. That integration creates power beyond anything compartmentalization allowed." Her observation captured something fundamental. The energy previously dedicated to maintaining separate identities now fueled both professional innovation and personal growth. Integration created capacity for presence previously impossible amid constant calculation about appropriate disclosures. The approaching holiday season brought consideration of new traditions. After discussion with immediate family, I offered to host Thanksgiving at my lakefront home, ending decades of gathering at grandmother Margaret's house. The proposal met surprising resistance from unexpected sources. "Your grandmother's house has history," my mother argued. The familiar setting might ease continuing adjustments to changed family dynamics. The concern revealed lingering discomfort with our transformed relationship. Hosting Thanksgiving would further cement the shifted power dynamic between us, something Eleanor still processed with understandable complexity. After consideration, I deferred the hosting change to the following year, recognizing the wisdom in gradual rather than abrupt transitions. As summer turned to autumn, professional publications requested interviews about my journey from single boutique to retail empire. The profile in Business Insider particularly resonated, focusing not on financial metrics, but on the psychological aspects of building while being underestimated. The continuous dismissal of my business created unexpected advantages, I explained to the interviewer. Operating without scrutiny allowed experimentation that might have faced premature criticism under greater visibility. Being underestimated created space for revolutionary rather than incremental innovation. The article generated significant response, particularly from women entrepreneurs facing similar dynamics. Their messages described the peculiar challenge of pursuing vision amid dismissal from those who support matters most emotionally. The commonality of this experience inspired a formal mentoring initiative connecting established business leaders with emerging entrepreneurs navigating family skepticism. As the anniversary of the revelation approached, I reflected on the complex journey from compartmentalization to integration. The professional achievements, expanded retail footprint, technological innovation, market valuation, provided measurable validation. More meaningful was the personal growth measured in authentic relationships, emotional presence, and congruence between internal identity and external presentation. The question Victoria had asked years earlier finally had an answer. No, proving others wrong wasn't worth sacrificing authentic life. But the journey through that sacrifice had created something neither compartmentalization nor premature exposure could have produced. A fully integrated identity encompassing both extraordinary achievement and genuine connection. 1 year after the Thanksgiving revelation, we gathered again around Grandmother Margaret's dining table. The physical setting remained unchanged, same Victorian architecture, same heritage china, same traditional menu. Yet everything else had transformed. Conversations flowed with newfound authenticity. Questions about my business came from genuine interest rather than veiled judgment. Most significantly, Family members shared their own vulnerabilities rather than projecting certainty about life's correct paths. The anniversary prompted natural reflection on the journey. After dinner, my mother and I stepped onto the enclosed porch that had hosted our first honest conversation following the revelation. The parallel wasn't lost on either of us. A year ago, I knew my daughter as someone who couldn't quite find professional footing, Eleanor observed, gazing through the windows at gathering twilight. Now we're building a business partnership I never imagined possible. The statement acknowledged her transformation as much as mine. In the months following the acquisition, Eleanor had embraced her role leading communications for our expanded retail division. Her corporate experience complemented my entrepreneurial approach, creating synergies that benefited both the business and our relationship. You've brought valuable perspective to our expansion strategy, I acknowledged. The executive team specifically mentioned your contribution to the Seattle market launch. Her genuine smile reflected newfound comfort with contribution valued on merit rather than title or hierarchy. The partnership embodied possibilities neither of us could have envisioned during years of misalignment. Beyond family reconciliation, the year brought opportunities to leverage success for broader impact. The Pinnacle Foundation launched with $50 million dedicated to supporting entrepreneurs facing systemic barriers. The initiative particularly focused on women building businesses amid familial or social skepticism, providing both capital and mentorship. Success without purpose becomes hollow, I explained at the Foundation's launch event. Building something revolutionary matters most when it creates pathways for others facing similar obstacles. The mentoring program paired established business leaders with promising entrepreneurs whose concepts faced resistance from traditional funding sources. My personal involvement included monthly sessions with 5 women building innovative retail concepts. Their determination despite dismissal from family, friends, and potential investors mirrored my earlier journey with uncomfortable precision. Everyone told me retail is dying, shared Zoe Chin, developing technology integrating augmented reality with in-store experiences. My parents call my business the expensive hobby, while pushing me toward corporate law positions. Her experience echoed countless conversations since revealing my journey publicly. The pattern transcended geography, demographics, and specific business models. Visionaries routinely face skepticism from those emotionally closest to them. Supporting these entrepreneurs through that challenging terrain became as meaningful as Pinnacle's continued expansion. Reconciliation with key family members progressed unevenly but steadily throughout the year. Uncle Maxwell, whose financial advice had once represented the most cutting dismissal, approached our relationship with unexpected humility. "I completely misread what you were building," he acknowledged during a private conversation at his 75th birthday celebration. Seeing only what fit my narrow definition of success rather than recognizing innovation happening before my eyes. The admission represented significant growth from someone whose identity centered on financial acumen. More meaningful than the acknowledgement was his subsequent behavior, asking genuine questions about retail innovation and occasionally offering perspective from his banking background without presumption or condescension. Cousin Heather navigated the most complex transition, simultaneously processing our personal history and her professional position within the reorganized company. Initial awkwardness gradually yielded to productive collaboration as her financial expertise contributed meaningfully to expansion planning. "Working with you rather than competing against you feels surprisingly natural," she observed during a strategy session. "Perhaps we were always meant to combine talents rather than compare them." The observation captured something essential about family relationships broadly, the potential for collaboration rather than competition when individual strengths receive recognition and respect. This principle extended beyond immediate family to reshape my approach to business partnerships, investor relationships, and team building. The new Thanksgiving tradition emerged organically rather than through declaration. While Grandmother Margaret's house hosted this year's gathering, planning for next year's celebration at my lakefront home proceeded with enthusiastic family participation. The transition symbolized acceptance of both my professional identity and the shifted family dynamic it necessitated. Public speaking opportunities allowed sharing the journey's lessons with broader audiences. A TED Talk titled "The Power of Being Underestimated" explored the counterintuitive advantages of building without premature scrutiny or expectation. The presentation resonated particularly with young entrepreneurs navigating skepticism from trusted voices in their lives. Being underestimated creates space for revolutionary thinking, I explained from the circular red carpet. When nobody expects extraordinary outcomes, experimentation flourishes without pressure to deliver conventional results. The talk's conclusion addressed the personal cost of proving others wrong. Building something revolutionary while hiding its existence exacts a price paid in authentic connection. The question becomes whether temporary sacrifice of transparency serves necessary protection of nascent vision or merely perpetuates patterns of seeking external validation. This reflection on motivation represented the year's most significant personal growth. Examining why I maintained secrecy revealed complex truth, legitimate strategic advantage intertwined with lingering desire for dramatic vindication. Recognizing this complexity allowed integration of the valid strategic elements while releasing the emotional components that no longer served either personal or professional development. Finding balance between work and personal life remained an ongoing practice rather than achieved destination. The relationship with Michael progressed with intentional boundaries between professional obligations and personal connection. Weekend trips to Michigan's wine country. Cooking classes taken together. Small traditions building foundation for potential shared future. You've created extraordinary professional success, he observed during a sunset sail on Lake Michigan. The question becomes what personal fulfillment looks like alongside that achievement. The question illuminated territory still requiring exploration, defining success beyond business metrics while integrating rather than compartmentalizing different aspects of identity. The journey ahead involved learning to value personal connection with the same intensity previously devoted to professional achievement. The profound lesson emerging from this year of integration crystallized during a mentoring session with young entrepreneurs. When asked what single insight I would share from my journey, the answer came with unexpected clarity. Being underestimated can become your greatest advantage, but only when you transcend the need to prove others wrong. Build with revolutionary vision protected from premature criticism, but recognize when that protection becomes a prison rather than a greenhouse. Success measured only in proving doubters wrong ultimately proves hollow compared to success measured in authentic impact and connection. This understanding continues guiding both personal and professional decisions as Pinnacle expands its footprint while I simultaneously expand capacity for genuine presence in relationships. The integration of previously compartmentalized identities created something neither could achieve independently, a life of impact without sacrifice of connection. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated in pursuing something important to you? How did you respond to that skepticism? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic journeys of overcoming obstacles and finding success against the odds. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, sometimes being underestimated is exactly the space you need to build something revolutionary.